I wanted to make this space to expound on the reality of the need to take counter-racist understanding or logic and apply it to the basic way that we allow ourselves to formulate opinions about how to solve this problem. I think we're bypassing one of the biggest ones, especially victims in the Northwestern Hemisphere, called concept United States. We're forgetting that one of the major ways that racists maintain their domination and one of the ways they abuse us and maintain our abuse, especially psychologically, is to confuse us with racial classification. Racial classification confusion. We have forgotten that there is no genetic nor biological marker for a race. It comes from the white supremacists maintaining their domination and abuse based on color. Black is something they have created when they begin to develop justification after centuries. This is after many centuries. They begin to write medical treaties and educational treaties and political treaties about how these combination of thoughts about color are intertwined with ideas and concepts about what we would call personality and class. Even personality, the descriptions of and the way it's applied comes from racist understanding what their dominant and abusive conditioning has done, and then writing a treatise and then explaining to all of them, this is how you justify yourself. This is how you maintain the deception. This is how you excuse abuse, degradation. The idea that black is anything other than a reaction to white supremacist racism, directly and indirectly. To relate it to anything else is a false consciousness that I believe wholeheartedly. I think the evidence will point to it is a creation of the racist. When a person has a thought in their mind, black is beautiful, that is a creation of the racist. Because that's not true. Black is a dominated and abused condition of people. It is not beautiful. It can be lusted after, it can be obsessed over, but it is not beautiful. We think that we have a personality that says, I want to tell someone this to make them feel good. And it comes out of our own so-called heart. All of that is a falsification of a victim's consciousness developed exquisitely and intricately by racist man, racist woman, and racist child, collectively the white race. The code informs us that race is racism, meaning any ideal or concept about race will ultimately support, maintain, and expand and further refine the domination and abuse of people based on color by those who have dedicated themselves to it and classified themselves as white. Race is racism, and racism is white supremacy. Racism is white supremacy as long as whiteness is supreme and the qualities and value systems of whiteness are supreme in our consciousness. Not in our feelings, but in our awareness of reality. That is racism. We don't have to wait for specific acts that we are aware of that are direct abuse. We're constantly dominated, which we don't want to admit. If we can't admit that, we typically have thoughts that give us the impression that the way to solve this problem is to pretend that the total domination of non-white people does not exist. And all we need is a refresher course on history or feelings, or compare ourselves with victims who are more directly, obviously abused. Comes from the racist. The ideal that a beard has something to do with masculinity or male sexuality. That too was designed by the racists when they came up with the concepts of race to justify, not to initiate, but to justify centuries and centuries of dedication to the domination and abuse of people based on color and concepts related to color. Concepts related to color of people. Whenever we espouse the ideal in our mind, and then it comes out of our mouth, America is racist. That is directly contributing to the domination and abuse through confusion that the racists want us to espouse. They want us to propagate. They want us to transplant that confusion because it diverts and deflects away from people behavior. People behavior that is understandable with observation. Anybody else have anything to add?
I want to go back a little bit on the Black is beautiful thing. And I think that comes out of us trying to counter the system because we are told that, Black is negative and with all the negative connotations, right? So I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Once you accept that you are what they call Black, then you would try to defend or get out of that position by being a Black. That is a capitulation to the racist because you accept the terms that they have decided for yourself, identification, not non-white, which would put you in a cosmic duty with every other non-white person to overthrow and replace the system of white supremacy with justice. If it's Black, we tend to forget that they have a disdain comparable to themselves for yellow, red, beige, blue, black. We know Black is not beautiful. You don't combat a lie with another lie. We could simply say we refuse to relate the concept of color to be related to evil or unrighteousness. We would simply say I'll replace in my psyche and then in my verbiage concepts about color being associated with things that are incorrect, things that are evil, things that are unrighteous. We don't have to combat a lie with a lie because no one is the type of person they should be. And so how do we know how we would really look if all we knew was righteousness? All we knew was correct behavior towards others. So even our physicality being pushed into this false pedestal, that too came from the racist. They valued Black female bodies to sexually exploit over all other bodies. So it's again, I think it's them through us, espousing their ideas and concepts. If we call Black what it really is, we won't want to be it or be in it. And we'd have to look at, well, who creates it? Who maintains it? Who's the source of this Blackness? Are we inferior by nature, or is something happening to us by those who are in a superior position? In my opinion, basic psychotherapy, you can't jump to the lie. I don't think that people don't do it, but I think that it doesn't solve the problem. It, act, it actually deflects away from white people. Now we're over here trying to build up a thing we're not even supposed to have, which is an ego, an ideal about our individual beauty or this group individual beauty.
So in other words, it's not countering the system by using accurate terms. It's not doing that. It's an attempt, but it's not countering the system. Is that what you're saying?
I don't even think it's an attempt. If you look in I love that book, the manual for diagnosing mental illnesses. In the prologues to the book, it talks about people being driven crazy by disassociating their reality or what they do and what they experience from what they say and think about themselves. Um, it mutates into a lot of things they diagnose, but it's a form of megalomaniac. You're completely wretched, but you're going to shout to the mountaintops how beautiful you are every day and how great life is. That is insanity because it ultimately just teaches that person to disassociate their behavior from reality. Their behavior is a reflection of what they go through or what they've experienced since they got here. So to tell them that that doesn't matter about how you describe yourself, that is, you're making them crazy, literally making them crazy. And that's actually one way to drive people crazy. Have them walk around every day saying that which is not true as if it were true, even though they have every reality that says, hey, you shouldn't be saying this. That's just not true.
Fake it till you make it. That's what this reminds me of.
If you go backwards with understanding uh, so-called mental problems, you'll see how people you can make people crazy. Dissociative disorder. If you try to teach people that they can disassociate from the reality of their experience and they can create different ideas and concepts about those experiences to suit themselves, that's how you create a schizophrenic, ultimately. So that's what we do, and that's what we're taught to do to one another. And we maintain the insanity of that the racists want us to. We are under racial classification confusion. We are not a race. We are not a community. We are victims of these people. And even our victimization, that's what we're united in, the fact that we're all dominated. We're not all abused in the same obvious manners, but that alone is abusive. You're not supposed to be dominated based on color. You're not supposed to have other people make up the options for your physical destiny, your life's journey. They put a cap on our purpose by having to have us deal with this shit, with white supremacy. So we're none of us are able to really fulfill our purpose of what we were supposed to be here for, in my opinion. No cursing to the host too.
I think she's on mute. I see her mic moving.
Go ahead, Dr. Singfield.
Okay. Man, I agree 100% with everything he just said. That VGQ was perfect for from my observation. Can you tell me what's the name of that book? What's the name of that book again? The manual of what?
the diagnostic manual for mental illness. This I always mess it up, and I have it on
It's
my
called
PDF on my
DSM.
Kindle.
It's called
DSM.
DSM
Yeah.
13.
I was about to say, what edition are we on now? 12, 13? 13th
It's on
edition.
13. Mm-hmm.
It's awesome to get the old ones too. There's bits and pieces on the internet available because those
True.
old
Yes.
ones are really before they allowed us to venture into so-called psychotherapy. So one of the older ones, I believe, from back in 1954. Um, I believe the United States, so-called white supremacists here, went to the United Nations and accused Russia of trying to overthrow the government by promoting homosexuality, trying to degenderize children, to get rid of ideas and concepts that they had created about gender. And of course, the older ones, they clearly understand that so-called homosexuality is insanity, it's temporary insanity. Another way to drive people crazy and keep them dominated and confused. Promote that behavior. I also see that this racial classification confusion is rampant in our concepts about what we just assume about so-called gender. A man is like this, a woman is like that, or a black man is, or a black woman is. Soon as you put the black in, you are taking the information directly from the racist textbook of confusion and feeding it to the brain computer and then propagating it out of your mouth because you've never questioned, where did I get this concept from? Where did I get this idea from? And of course, associating ourselves with the dominant group with statements like, see, women used to have, or men used to be, and there's never been a legitimate man in any of our living experiences or anybody we come from directly. We've known the illegitimate white supremacist man, and we've known non-white males who've been illegitimized. I combine and do comparative analysis from information in the third chapter of The Man Not, compare it with black on black violence in the first two chapters, talking about how our ideas and concepts about one another is formed from a direct reaction to not dealing with the threat in the room being the white supremacists. So we come up with concepts on how we, in our minds, falsify classifications among ourselves just to appease ourselves and not deal with the white supremacists, to not acknowledge the threat and the hostility of that group against us. Dion, you want to speak?
But yeah, what's up? How you guys doing? Shout out to the room. Shout out to the host, the co-host, and then everybody inside of the room. Yeah, one thing that I've noticed about racism, white supremacy, as I get older, how a lot of times it takes away confidence from our people. In order to dismantle it, you have to have some type of confidence that you can dismantle it, and it makes us untrustworthy of each other when you have ideas, when you have ways of how you could dismantle it, and you go to other victims of white supremacy and you try to tell them ideas that you may have about dismantling the system. Um, it creates a lot of anti-blackness in that arena with each other, far as not because it's like this, right? Um, in order to dismantle the system, there are going to be certain ideas that certain people have, and it's going to take cooperation from other non-white people, other victims of racism. But it seems as if the white supremacists have figured out a way how to take away that confidence for as trusting each other or even having confidence in each other for even ideas. So you can't, it's hard to even go to the next step, right? And we, okay, like prime example, right? It was this politician named Gabe Piedimonte who came onto the app, and he was trying to push his agendas onto the people on this app. And it was a straight white man, right? It was a straight white man. And there were some people who were aware enough of this, but then there were others who were looking at this white man as if he was a savior, as if and he failed worse than any other candidate on this app. Like all of the black candidates that have failed as well. Um, Gabe was the worst failure out of us all, but he seemed to have the most support when it came to black people on this app. And me being a candidate myself in the past, like that boggled me. I'm like, I'm looking at Gabe. I'm like, this is a whole white man, and he got these people hypnotized on this app, and it just showed the powerfulness of our people as well, our potential. Because I didn't get half as much support as Gabe got, but even though I didn't win my election, I did a lot better. I did way better. Um, and so it shows the potential that we can have. If we did kind of just, you know, uh, trust each other a little bit more. And it's hard to not look at the people, right? Like, because I understand me being, um, you know, kind of aware of of the system of white supremacy and how it works. I kind of understand, so I try my best not to victim blame or victim shame. And sometimes it is hard to do when you see your people just deliberately, just just obviously just being fooled and bamboozled by whiteness. It's kind of hard to not have a sense of like, what are you doing? Like, why are we doing this? But at the same time, you got to understand what's going on. Like, this is the system of white supremacy. But I see that the co-host have his hand up, so I'm not gonna hog the mic too much. But yeah, I just wanted to share that experience. I'll land right there.
One of the things I noticed is that when the term, if you don't understand white supremacy, if you don't understand what it means to be supreme among people, what it is, and then how did they do that, you will ultimately keep being, wow, I'm surprised that this guy won and he did worse than all of us. If you look at how people conceive of manhood, you can see it when you see a commercial and a adult white male is holding the hands of children walking forward into the sunset, and it's a commercial about cancer treatment, which everybody associates with death. But this white man is walking into the horizon, facing unknown certainties, holding the hands of children, white children, and maybe a white wife. That is the symbolism that this man is undefeatable. This is the man of men who could go to the edge and horizons of death and come out the other side because he's the creator of life. He is the sustainer, is the man of men, is the man of the universe. We've had these commercials since we were infants. We went to white hospitals, huge buildings with white men painted on pictures in the room, and everything to save you and mama and them had to go to a court with the white man sitting in his big chair, and he's got more power and authority than anybody in the room, but he's a wimpy, decrepit, old white man. But when he talks, people listen. You wouldn't be surprised if you really know. If you don't understand, we would not waste our effort on things, in my opinion, called what they identify as politics. If we don't understand the body politic of what does it mean that I'm dominated by a hostile group of people who are dedicated to their hostility against me. It ain't personal, it's business. They can't even choose not anymore, it seems. It's a lot of things we just wouldn't engage in. We just wouldn't waste the energy in. I really don't think we would see race is racism. You wouldn't be trying to improve black kids' testing scores because black kids are always going to have horrible testing scores. That's what it means to be a black kid. It's never going to be satisfactory. Ever, ever, never. This is refined white supremacy. This is not white supremacy 100 years ago. Everything that's supposed to work is not going to work because that's what it means to be supreme. If we know what it is and how it works, that's the critical part. Because if you understand how it works, if you understand how they make us, me, Diallo, me, then I can unmake what they have made. That's what we're supposed to be dismantling, their handiwork inside of us. Just go be around white people all day. You'll find that you are a twisted individual. You'll have all kind of thoughts against your own best interest. You'll be acting in ways against your own best interest. You'll be reacting. It'll be hard to control inner emotions that you're fighting, that you don't even understand why you feel threatened. When we say dismantling the system is people. And people do stuff and have done stuff, hiding in plain sight. We have to find out how they do it and how they did it in us to make us this compliant as individual collectives. Dismantling them, replacing them and their behavior patterns that they have created in us is our highest responsibility. Anything in you, black, has to be traced back to the racist, or you will not ever be able to be universal man, universal woman. We have to exercise the demons in us, in our own self. Dion?
Yeah, man, that was a great point. Um, Even as I get more educated about white supremacy and how it works, right? And I'm learning about all of the inventions that our people created. I'm talking about things, ideas that were stolen from us. Like, okay, just like the .com era, right? The .com, that was actually was a black man's invention, and that invention was stolen from him. The internet, like a lot of inventions. Hold up, give me a second. I want to read out a few of these inventions. Hold up, give me a quick second. because, well, you know what? I don't have it on me right now. Just for the sake of time, I'm not going to do that. But uh, white supremacy have been exploiting our people for so long, and they've been taking away ideas. They have been using their power of dominance to extrapolate ideas from us and just claim it as their own, right? And it shows you how brilliant we are as a people, but it also shows you how powerless we are as a people, to where you can come up with an idea and just be completely victimized. And it doesn't even matter how powerful your idea is. By living in a system of white supremacy, a white person can just come along and say, nope, that's my idea. And yes, it is a very, very beneficial idea for society, but because you are a black person or because you are a non-white person, I'm going to use this for my ability and I'm going to claim it as my own. And
That right there. Stay right there for a second, Dion. You just said a white person is doing something after a black person created something. That is what domination is, if you allow that to happen. That's what we need to understand. How is it we still, every day, maintain their system the way things are at every occupation, paid and unpaid? That's what we need to dismantle. The value system that would maintain these people who steal from you every day. And yet we invest in them every day. And yet they steal from us every day. And yet they invest. We invest, they steal. We invest, they take. We invest, they appropriate. To divest starts with that. How the hell do I keep putting in?
yeah, yeah. So what I was saying was, you are absolutely right about that. And we, like I was explaining earlier about the double-edged sword, right? Understanding that we are being dominated, but then understanding that because we are powerless, a lot of our people do not have the confidence to trust one another with ideas, unless it is co-signed by other white people. That's another thing that I've noticed, is that a lot of times ideas are not, even though they may be a great idea, a lot of times we don't trust that black person unless it is co-signed by another white person, right? So it's all in the domination aspect, like what you were talking. I personally think that how we can help with the dismantling of white supremacy is more cooperation with each other. Understanding that white people are not going to never co-sign their overthrow, their dismantling. So one way is to just listen to each other's ideas and really take it in and process it, and understanding that we are under white supremacy. So by understanding that, you will throw away any thoughts that may automatically make you think of this non-white person as something that is inferior and incapable of having a good thought or idea. Because as a non-white person, we automatically, because of our colonization, we automatically think of a negative thought a lot of times. When we hear something that we never heard before, or we hear an idea that we never heard of before, we just immediately think of the negative. So I think how
30
we can,
seconds.
yeah, I think how we could dismantle white supremacy is if we just sit back and if we, you know, listen to each other more and take each other's ideas and really process it individually, independent of the system. I'll land.
Wait a minute, EJ. I'm gonna let you talk, but I'm gonna let that sit for a second. The term confidence was mentioned. I use the term will instead of the term confidence. We need the will to change, the will to counter this system. That's something that we're lacking. We're lacking will. Trust each other. Your idea is your idea. My idea is my idea. I don't expect you to agree. We are in a system of racism, white supremacy. I don't expect anybody to agree with me, nor do I want that. I'm not looking for you to agree with me. The end game, the end goal is to counter the system. There's going to be many different ideas out there. No one idea is the same. No one person is the same. So don't expect someone to agree with you. You have a cosmic duty. Fulfill your cosmic duty. This is your journey. Yours alone.
I agree. I also think there's evidence that all of us who are subject to white supremacy, um, if we scratch around a little bit, wander around and ask a little bit, we'll find our purpose is directly related to solving the greatest problem among people, which is white supremacy racism. I don't think anybody's purpose who is non-white is separate from that. Because when you attempt to search a little bit, your purpose always confronts racism, or you want to deal with a symptom of the system of white supremacy racism. So you should just put all your effort into that. The what, why, and how, and what. What do I want to do? Why do I want to do it? How do I expect to get it done? And what do I expect the results to be? The constructive results. If you understand white supremacy racism, and your what do you want to do is to replace it with balance between people. After that, many things I think are wasteful, and many things also are what the racists would call a necessary evil. Doing things for paid occupation is a necessary evil. Just to eat food and just to exist, necessary evil. But you can choose that what you do doesn't contribute to the longevity maintenance. There's things you can indirectly do, and there's things you can directly do to support and sustain white supremacy racism. I thought of importing weaves to take advantage of how all these black girls think they're very ugly. And I could import weaves at a lower price than they're getting them and exploit them for a few seasons and have some girls come down here who think they're ugly and do their hair and their makeup for a couple weeks. And I thought about that. And I could do that, probably set it up in about 48 hours and make a lot of money real quick. But I know I'd be taking advantage of what the system of white supremacy racism has created in these people. And so I'm not going to do it. Simple.
Yes, sir. Hey, Mr. Godbody, I see you down there. Yeah, I'm gonna come in there in a few
Sing
seconds.
Q. Let's hear from you, Sing Q.
Um, who? I just want to say who is AJ? I
Did you have
think
a comment on the wait? Do you have a comment on the title or what was said, Dr. Sinq?
I did it first, but I wanted to make sure that I think you asked somebody named AJ to go hold on or something. I just wanted to
It
make
was
sure
me.
that they were able to go. Oh, that's you. Okay. All right. Um, yeah, so my comment is based on I heard the word confidence. I agree that that is the will, and I think that on a day-to-day basis, the racist white supremacists are constantly using psychological operations to break the will of the victims, and that will to counter white supremacy. It was said earlier about an attempt, black people saying that, some black people were saying that black is beautiful. And I think that that was an attempt on the uh, insane mind of victims of white supremacy trying to increase their will. Um, so as a as a suggestion to strengthen the will, I suggest that victims practice saying no to some necessities for a brief time that could range from 3 to 30 days. That's like, necessities like food, saying no to food, saying no. Yeah, I mean, you can't say no to food for 30 days, but you can say no to food for 8 hours a day for 30 days. Um, just to help strengthen the will. And that's it. I have to go too. Um, thanks for having this.
Again, there is no genetic nor biological marker for race or color. To try to beat the racist at being a race uplifter, race promoter, or the ideal that we are a race of people is playing into rhetoric created directly and indirectly by the racist. It is designed to keep us confused about what the problem is. Them. They are the problem, a hostile group of people. Not positive self-image. That is not the issue. You will not have a positive self-image as long as you are dominated by another people. It is impossible to have a positive self-image for black children. It is impossible. They should not have a positive self-image. They should have a POW self-image, illegitimate POW, so that they be focused on getting free from the system of white supremacy racism and replacing worldwide, globally, for all conduct between people, the system of justice. There will be no positive image in Hollywood. There is no such thing as positive if you're subject to racism. There's no such thing as success as long as you are subject to another people by their reasoning, by their dedication, by their devotion. There is not supposed to be a black neighborhood anywhere. Black is a direct reaction to domination and abuse based on color. There is nothing to boast in. There is nothing to be appreciated or adorned or made sacred. It is a tragic arrangement. And if we acknowledge that daily, we will abandon many of the wasteful activities of our brain computer.
Racist man and racist woman, they've done a lot of programming on us, a lot of training in our music, in music, in TV shows, movies, etc. That's where the programming comes in. That is why we behave the way we do at times, most of the time. And yeah, we have to work against it. We have to cut the TV off. We have to start reading more. Yeah, do everything you can to do the opposite of what they want us to do.
Can anybody list anything they abandoned that led to psychological liberty that formerly they had been convinced and had pursued was a black thing, part of their nature, natural personality? I'll tell you one for me. The way we talk, um, being exposed to racist in the area I grew up in, and being exposed to racist programming that educated black people spoke a certain way. It was enforced in my living situation that we weren't allowed to speak regular nigger talk, just regular black speak, the way we normally would speak, especially if somebody white was present. But the phrase went around a lot that if you don't talk right, white people won't understand you and you won't get a job, right? But then I learned among the whites, they have certain inflections that come with their hypocrisy and their falsehood of being white publicly to us. And it used to give me constant anxiety when white people, racists, would tell me I didn't talk black enough or I didn't talk like a regular nigger. Just by studying linguistics, archaeology, anthropology, and finding out where the root of these so-called English language comes from, it was liberating. It was I mean, literally, my I relaxed. My throat, my face, my tongue. Yeah. It's and I don't get that anxiety anymore. I don't think or care about what they may think I sound like, or what black people so called may think I sound like. And I don't allow the deception that if you speak good English, that must mean intelligence. I don't allow that deception, nor promote it. That frustrates racists when they come at me that way, and I don't react the way I'm expected to react. It drives them crazy, gives them anxiety. I told a lady yesterday at work, she came up attempting to speak the patois of the people of this island because she lives here. And a white man was listening. I said, "Are you speaking nigger speak to me?" He laughed. She stopped and immediately went into the regular English she and I both speak. And I said, "Yeah, I don't speak that. I'd rather speak the common tongue. I'm a captive." Frustrated her. I think I countered the racist. I'll give you another one. Uh, because of Urugu, I understood that racists created this idea that males are supposed to have this constant desire for competition or fear of competition or being a competitive mood in all things male, especially black males. Supposed to have this physical competition. We always want to measure ourselves by other black males' physicality or virility or ability to do violence. I learned that that comes from them. I learned through The Half Has Never Been Told that they groomed us to be bestial to each other, to control one another. And we fought over status that we thought we had related to them. So that freed me totally that no, I don't believe in this black male ideal, that I'm not supposed to question this concept, that I worship violence or I admire the most violent. I refuse to feed that demon anymore or accept it or promote it. And I expose it when I can.
I guess what eliminating certain words from my vocabulary, like fair and bias and white privilege. Well, that last one was never really a part of my vocabulary. Yeah, eliminate certain words, not celebrating, Fourth of July, um, and other holidays. Let me see what else. Yeah, that's all I can think of at the moment. Like that, EJ?
Juneteenth, waste of time. Anybody's so-called liberation from so-called colonialism, waste of time. Any celebration of a so-called African American, waste of time. All these things promote racial classification confusion. There is no biological nor genetic marker for color. To distrust certain geographical niggers, waste of time. Fortunately, unfortunately, through racial dislocation, I've traveled the earth, roamed the world quite a bit, and I see racial classification confusion daily. I daily talk to black people who claim they hate other black people who speak a different language than they do and were born on a different piece of geography. I ask them if they've had any personal relationships. No, I hate them. I don't trust them. They're disease carriers. They're thieves. Black people, just like them. They just speak another slave master's tongue. Waste of time and energy.
At one time, I used to be obsessed with trying to find the latest perfume. I had to have the latest perfume all the time. Just money, throwing money away, you know. Yeah, so I no longer do that. I no longer, I have to find out what's the latest perfume, what's the latest scent, what are they? No. So that's one thing I've changed.
There were black people who spent over 100 years trying to uplift the race. I believe we're doing the same thing now, trying to uplift the race instead of trying to replace the system of white supremacy racism, what it is and how it works, with a system of justice, balance between people. Concepts that we have today that are promoted among us is to do a lot of things for the race or in the name of blackness. These things are designed by the racist to confuse the minds of the victims, waste energy on trying to get away from and not acknowledge a hostile group of people and their hostility towards us. That is the first building block of how to deal with what it already is, what our domination and abuse already is, the current state of. This is the idea of reaching back and promoting ideas of what we used to do or used to invent. If our inventions did not directly overthrow the power dynamic between white people and non-white people over life and death, it was an invention to maintain the system of white supremacy racism, to make non-white people and more than likely white supremacists more comfortable in their dominant position. To glory in those things never has been enough to overthrow these people. We don't need an ego to overthrow these people. We need a code for how to deal with their ego. And in my opinion, that's United Independent Compensatory Code System concept. The more every individual victim abandons race promotion and race upliftment and applies simple opinion methods in the code, the quicker we are to exposing and solving this problem. A hostile group of people and their hostility towards us. Smoking damages. Greetings. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. Greetings. So I'm in a bit of a noisy environment as well. So if I cut off slightly, it's just because I don't want to have a lot of background noise in the space. But yeah, the question you asked are things that you've abandoned. If any of us have abandoned certain things, yeah, it's just I try to abandon all of the above. Those things that you guys were just talking about. Um, I always ask myself that same question, no matter what it is, whether it's I don't know, celebrating in the way that they say we're supposed to celebrate, or speaking in a certain way that they say we're supposed to speak, and if you don't speak like that, then we're not gonna give you this type of goodies or those types of goodies. I always ask myself, am I still, after I do this thing that you say you want me to do and celebrate in a certain way, am I still subject to you? After I get these Nike trainers or whatever, am I still subject to you? Am I still on your plantation? Am I still a slave? Right? If you tell me to speak a certain way and you say, yeah, speak the Queen's English or the King's English and blah 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 blah, am I still going to be subject to you after I, you know, go along with the type of stuff that you want me to get along with, to go along with? Even if they say to you or something like, you're a black person, go sleep with some white people. Go sleep with some white people. We're saying this is what you should do. After I do that, am I still subject to your system? The answer is yes. Then, you know, then these things are just, these things are just window dressing. These things are just designed to get you to feel a little bit more comfortable in your chains, feel a bit more comfortable in your captivity. They're all designed to make you think that you're not still a slave. And the reality is that we're still slaves. Now, I'm not trying to. I don't want to talk. I don't want to talk people down. And I think someone mentioned confidence earlier. Um, yeah, like sometimes when we talk like this, some non-white people listen to us and they think we're trying to get other people, get other black people to have no confidence or no or low self-esteem and stuff, right? But it's not. It's to get you to develop the will to want to fight against the system. And most of the time when I get that type of will is when I'm more grounded in how I see myself. The one time I forget that I'm not on the plantation anymore, then now the will's left me. If you don't think the problem that you're facing is urgent enough, you're probably less likely to take the problem seriously and to want to actually do something about it. So yeah, it's really, really good to be grounded in the reality. The reality of the situation is that we're slaves on this planet. We're slaves on this planet, especially if you're black. We're definitely the most victimized on this planet in this system of racism, white supremacy. Now that's either true or false. If we're victims, then all these other things that they give us and allow us to do is just to get us to feel a bit more comfortable.
They reserve the greatest comforts for those who are most abused, so that you're most distracted from responding correctly.
It's sad. I mean, even over here, I know this year they're probably going to be really pushing the whole Notting Hill Carnival thing, and they're going to be pushing that celebration. Come down here, black people, come celebrate. You got 2 days. We'll allow you to go have this party, dress up. They even have this thing in Carnival now where you're inspired to throw. I'm making this up. I wish I was making it up, but throw chocolate at each other. Has anyone seen that? In these carnivals, some of these celebrations, they inspire black people to throw chocolate at each other while dancing to music. I
Yeah, they
mean,
did it in some floats here.
it's such, when you stand back and look at it, you just, wow, this is such programming. You just, that's like the literal image of the happy slave on the plantation, enjoying, trying to forget about where we are, trying to forget our reality on this planet, just running around, dancing and singing while we're subject to this system. It's pitiful.
Indeed, it is. I've seen it firsthand. It's ridiculous. I mean, it's ridiculous. Every female you thought who you'd never see in a thong is in a thong. No matter what she weighs or what she does not work out, does not matter. And they're grinding on each other and on everything and on everybody and on poles and on cars, children, everybody. I think it's what they used to make us do to parade like a new market, or some people who was going to market who had already been slaves, or maybe going from one owner to another, because the French would take one group of slaves from the Spanish, and okay, we're like they did here. Um, they bought this plot of dirt and the people here from the Dutch. So they probably had everybody dance around naked and show their wares, what they were buying, and show their virility and willingness to fuck for or to buck for master. That's what I think it may come from. That's what I think it may be us tapping into. We want to go back to when that was it. That was all we were worth.
Dance, dance for massa. Frolic for their enjoyment. It's exactly what it is. Whether it's sports, whether it's carnival, whether it's any of these types of stuff, right? I don't know, going somewhere to break dance. I'm even talking about black people sometimes with each other and having quote fun or distraction for a minute or two in a day. I'm talking about, a lot of these things are sponsored by white people as well, by the white supremacists themselves, and you think it's something that's going to help you as a black person. These are just distractions. These are really, really just distractions. All of it geared towards, like I say, just not just so that we don't face our reality on this planet. Like I said, no matter what the activity is, I just ask myself the same question: am I still subject to you? When I've done doing all this, when I've done doing this, making this money, and etc., am I still subject to you? If that's true, then I need to be. I can still make money, but I need to be changing my strategy and doing something else and thinking of another way to counter the system. Because obviously, just that alone, what I'm doing is not working if I'm still subject to the system.
One of the things I've noticed is that the three things that all people want to do at any time: they want to dominate others, they want to be at peace, or they merely want to exist. The vast majority of us have proven that we just want to exist. We don't care about balance between people. We don't care how we're treated. And we don't want really anyone questioning too much how we treat others in our immediate environment. That's what all these festivities are for. The vast majority of us who we just want to exist. We just want to exist. We have to accept that. I have to accept that. I'm really speaking to myself. We have to accept that and let them be.
This is what we was talking about in another space last week or week before, quite a few times. We were talking about just the apathetic response. Um, the majority of the white supremacists on this planet, one of the ways that they practice racism, white supremacy, through apathy. And us as victims, we have an apathetic response to our victimization as well. Like you say, we just kind of, the majority of us on this planet, we just want to sort of just coast along and not have to look at it. If we don't have to look at it, we don't have to acknowledge it. If we don't have to acknowledge it, then, we can just, like you say, just exist. Unfortunately, I remember when I first read that in the code book, the difference between living and existing. Um, and I had to really look at that and think, wow, Mr. Fuller is correct. We are existing. This isn't living. This isn't. We don't have justice on this planet. And if you're not bothered about that, if you understand that you don't have justice on this planet and you don't want to produce that, then that's your apathetic response. It's not like you don't know. Most people on the planet, white or black, understand that that we have a system of racism, white supremacy on this planet, and choose to do nothing about it. For the bulk of my life, I chose to do nothing about it whatsoever, and and that's as a victim of racism, white supremacy. So I can imagine. I can only imagine what it's like to be a white person on this planet, having a system that benefits you. They their apathetic response and deliberate practice of racism, white supremacy as well. I have to look at those. I understand the concept now when people just don't. Some of us as victims, we don't even use the term racist suspect. We just say white people. So I do definitely understand that angle of it. right? It's definitely an interesting concept. But to address the title, I completely agree with what was said before. Race is definitely racism. To even call yourself a member of a race is to feed into the same nonsense. When properly analyzed, that's exactly what race is. It's racism. Who are you supposed to be in a race against? Uh, or race to go where? Anything. The whole notion of race is just to practice racism.
The only functional form, white supremacy racism. Um, I remember thinking on, can we beat them at this race thing? The Honorable Elijah Muhammad thought we could, but we can't because they created the evil, and so they know its origins, limitations, and its refinement stage is yet to come. So it's wasteful in trying to. I guess it is a form of distraction when you attempt to promote the idea that we are a race when the only reference you have is the white race and what they've done to become the white race. They do a lot of murdering, a lot of raping, a lot of more killing and murdering and raping of people, raping of resources, raping of so-called nature. Constant evolution cycle of murder and rape. So that's the only way you can be the race. Um, Imagine if we give up the concept that because of our color, we're supposed to like certain ideas of entertainment, or we're supposed to regard entertainment as watching non-white people act as if white supremacy racism doesn't affect them, sing as if white supremacy racism doesn't affect them.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out as well. The whole beat the racists at their own game syndrome, which they've indoctrinated us to believe that that's never going to work, and it's been tried as well. You know that whole beat the racists at their own game thing, where I don't know if the white supremacists do this, then uh, out the white supremacists, or replace their system with a system of supremacy of our own. That's not going to work. And when I think of their system, they have to be constantly at war. Um, a lot of them, I found talking to a lot of white supremacists down through the years, is that they don't like that situation, but they are prepared to put up with that because obviously reactions, being subject to to a white supremacy, you're going to react towards it. Sometimes in a constructive way, sometimes most of the time in a non-constructive way. But injustice of any kind produces reactions to that injustice. So they have to be constantly, quote, looking over their shoulder and thinking, how are the slaves going to react to today? How are the slaves going to react to next week or next month? But that's exactly what they do. Like we were talking about hypervigilance. They have a complete, it's not white fragility or anything like that. That a lot of white supremacists like to use that uh, fragility thing. It's hyper awareness, white supremacist hypervigilance. They don't really, a lot of them don't seem to care that they're constantly at war because their whole system is backed up by force. It's not backed up by justice. It's not something that a lot of people really, even if we do, because I mean, we all comply to a certain extent with this system, but it's not when we really think about it, it's not really willing in the, I don't know, the bare definition of the
It's not a
willing.
privilege.
Yeah,
It's
it's
a
not
threat.
privilege or anything.
It's a
Yeah,
threat.
yeah. It's a constant threat of violence. Yeah, we all have to live with that. That if we don't go along with that, it's going to be backed up with force. It's an enforcement situation. So yeah, that reaction. But like I said, the more of them I've spoken to down through the years, a lot of them are prepared to accept it. For some of them it makes them uncomfortable, but a lot of them are really prepared to accept the constant state of war, constant state of having to protect their unjust system. It's crazy people. It's like you were saying the other day, EJ, the psychopathic, it's a psychopathic mindset. No other real way to we're dealing with psychopaths, and some people they don't like to talk about it like that because you're calling a whole bunch of people a psychopath.
Scared
Yeah,
of the boogeyman.
if you're a white supremacist, you are a psychopath,
They know it.
whether you
They
know it or
know
not.
it.
You are, of course you are, of course they do. Right? And with Prince Harry the other day coming out with that unconscious bias stuff, he wants us to concentrate on, I don't know, 1% or 0.0000000% of white people that may be somewhere buried under a rock somewhere who don't understand that they're in a white that we're on the white supremacy system. I mean, asking the slaves on the plantation to concentrate on the 1% maybe of white person, which is statistically insignificant in comparison to the rest of the white people on this planet. That
He was
this
proving the
racism
white
is practiced.
sacrifice theory.
Yeah, yeah. All this whole nonsense about unconscious bias. We do this system and we run this, but we really don't know what we're doing. We just have no idea. The whole idea is absurd that white people could keep this system running for millennia and millennia as long as they have, but just do it unconsciously. Ridiculous. Ridiculous.
Brilliant, evil masterminds, totally ignorant of their collusion. Right. You have to want to be stupid to believe that. And to want to be stupid means they have terrorized you, terrified you, made you timid to where you won't even think, to trust yourself to think on your own outside of their boundaries.
And that fear as well, EJ. Glad you brought that up as well. If any victims listen to this and listen back to the recording, if you want to see that fear play out in real time, if you want to conduct a little mini experiment, you talk to a non-white person who's captured by, or believes themselves to be in a quote relationship with a white person. You speak about racism, white supremacy in an honest, forthright way in front of those two people, this quote black and white couple. You can see that I've seen it with myself. You can literally see the fear on that non-white person's face. Like, no, no, no. I can't, even though they know what you're saying is correct most of the time, but they dare not say anything in front of their white partner,
The tea
right?
and crumpets will disappear.
Exactly. Exactly. They're gonna catch hell. They understand what you're saying is correct. The white person understands what you're saying is correct. And sometimes you can even see psychologically, you can even see like the non-verbal communication. Sometimes if
The,
you say
the threat.
something,
The
yeah, yeah,
threat.
yeah,
You
and
can see
and
her
they
or
look
him
over.
looking at them
Mm,
like, you better
yeah,
not
yeah, yeah.
fucking think.
You better not
Don't you
agree with
fucking
this.
think.
Yeah, you better not agree. And sometimes they look over at the white partner in almost as if asking for permission. So they agree, but they want to check over the white partner. Is it okay for me to agree with this part here? What this other slave is saying? And they look, if the white person kind of agrees that yeah, you can show that you're all right with this, then then you see the relief on the non-white person's face. Wow. But if the white person in a relationship disagrees with what you're saying about racism, white supremacy, no, no, no. You ain't gonna get agreement from that non-white person most of the time. Most of the time.
Remember, I don't know if anybody knows, but based on my research, experience, and understanding, these are black people who have been totally degraded psychologically. They have bought into the white lie. These people usually know a whole bunch of white history, have a very good white education, and they bought into the concept that these people cannot be beat on the battlefield. cannot be mastered in the classroom, and cannot be strategized against. And then to have filth sex become their obsession or their appetite, um, that's the coup de grace. So their most uh, pleasurable experiences in their life experience has been filth sex provided by the racist class. And to be touted as a pet or a indentured or endeared servant is what these people have come to believe is their highest standard in life, their highest achievement in life, to have this comforted position, perverted position. They believe the live race. They have a shameful concept of themselves and who they come from as a race. And they have a false, elevated concept of people who classify themselves as white. They believe these people to be the models of truth, veracity, honor, nobility. Again, part of the education process. Usually their entertainment is even centered around a false concept of whiteness.
Thank you, Mr. Evolutionist, for this very accurate analysis and observations of what we are seeing and dealing with on this planet within this system of white supremacy. The fear that Smokey Damage mentioned when discussing these just abominations we call a white person raping a non-white person, so-called relationship, so-called boyfriend, girlfriend, wife and husband. Whenever it's a white person and non-white person, that is just a really abominable act being committed from the white person. And when the non-white person, that scenario with the white person and non-white person being met with some truth, yeah, that is so that causes a lot of fear and anxiety in both the white and the non-white, because the contradictions become apparent. The reality that this white person has chosen a victim to further victimize, to further make weak through lying to them by pretending that we are in a balanced relationship, while at the same time we have people who look like me, white people, white supremacists, and all of the areas where there are dark people totally destroying, exploiting, manipulating, and deceiving non-white people across the planet. But I've decided to choose you and to pretend that I love you, and I'm going to help you, I'm going to give you affection and care, while at the same time I allow my white family, my race, the only race that exists, the white race, I'm going to allow these people to continue destroying people who look like you. But yeah, I love you. You're my hubby. You're my wifey. You're my. It's just really tragic. And when a non-white person is met with this reality, the brain computer just begins to fizzle out because so many contradictions. Your whole life you've been mistreated solely because you are a non-white person, and you found yourself in the bedroom with a white person, and things may appear to be better for you. They may feel better, but at the same time, you're still in the system where every day there are, it's on automatic. The system and its attempt to destroy us is very much on automatic. System in place, the way it has been designed. Everything a non-white person tries to do, whether no matter what offices we have to go to, no matter what paperwork we have to get done, it's all designed to mistreat us and drain us. But hey, I'm a non-white person. I got a white wife. Um, this is going to be easier for me because I have a white wife, white husband. Sometimes it may be, but the damage is very, very vast, and the degrading of ourselves. It just reminds me um, of how they've set up the system. When I have been so-called traveling more, and I see these places that are so-called areas where people with more money are allowed to be, and I'm seeing a lot. I'm only seeing so-called interracial couples, and it's really tragic how they set up the system. Where if you want more comfort, allow yourself to be raped, sexually assaulted by a white person. The system has made it so that if you allow this to happen to you, you will get more crumbs. You will be allowed more comfort, but at the cost of your sanity. Is going to make you more.
Your mind.
Yes, yes,
It's going to make your mind weaker
exactly.
and make you justify the domination and abuse of people based on color that you know exists. It's going to make you justify the domination and abuse of people based on color that you already see, including yourself. They will drag you into sexual pollution that convinces you that you ought to be under their dominion because of your filthy sex.
Yeah, and I want to speak briefly about what's the result? What can be an end result from being raped by a white man or woman? The end result is sometimes offspring who are programmed and mistreated in a manner that they become totally. Um, the best way to describe it would be just deranged evil. I would say. Um, yeah,
Monstrosity.
monstrosity. I'm noticing a pattern where a white woman, a long tradition maybe, a white woman will produce non-white male offspring with a black male, and I'm speaking specifically about Kevin Davis. Yes, Kevin Davis was an offspring of a white mother and a black male. Kevin Davis is a victim of racism, and due to his victimization, due to the insane programming he received, he ended up killing his white supremacist mother and attempting to. I, I'll just say that he killed his white offspring mother, and maybe that should happen to all white supremacists who produce offspring. But it's not good. It's not constructive to be having white and non-white interracial, so-called interracial interactions, sexual interactions, while the race war is being operated and maintained by white people who believe and are dedicated to the system of white supremacy. It just makes absolutely no sense. And until this is like common talk, that the average non-white person is brave enough to emit from their mouths, we're gonna keep dealing with the same tacky situations we have here on planet Earth. And I'll stop there. Thanks for allowing me to speak for so long.
In my opinion, based on my observation and research, the most aggressive racists who have sex with non-white people and then produce offspring by non-white people want victims exquisitely of their own to dominate and abuse and confuse. Perfect example is I think it's on Netflix, the story of so-called Sally McNeil killing her so-called husband Ray McNeil. Watch that documentary if you really understand what racism is and how it works. This is the refined stage that we are in. Connect the dots to all the other non-white males and females who have abused, neglected, killed, sodomized, raped countless non-white children under their care, either through so-called adoption or directly raping a victim and having offspring. These are non-white people who are the most vicious, the most malicious against non-white people, in particular black people. The exact opposite of the way they want to be projected, that they are the most loving, understanding, caring, or ignorant white people. These are the most evil, the most treacherous and malicious. In my opinion, based on understanding of counter-racist understanding, logic, and research, these are the most evil, and we ought to expose that. We ought to expose that and train our emotions and our affections to see this as the most egregious offense of a white supremacist, is to have sex with and then produce offspring with a non-white person.
Peaceful greetings. Thank you for the space and the discussion. To just add kind of my observations from what I've been hearing, I was reading a book once called Just Mercy. I think it was made into a film. But one thing that kind of caught my mind and got me thinking about white people and the tragic arrangements that they force non-white people into under a system of racism, white supremacy. These so-called, I wouldn't even call them relationships, but for the people who may not be familiar with tragic arrangements. White women especially would prey on non-white males, knowing that under a system of racism, white supremacy, those black males were going to be killed, lynched, terrorized, etc. And knowing that they would continue to prey on these males, call them lie and call them relationships, those males would be attacked and terrorized, and the white females would be nowhere to be found. And unsurprisingly, that trend continues today. Not too long ago, there were black males in the news. That one black male was terrorized by white people because he was caught in a so-called caught in a relationship with a white female. And it's something that slipped my mind for a long time, and that wasn't something that I noticed. But in order to do that, you definitely have to be conscious and aware of your position as a white person. White people are not ignorant about the system of racism, white supremacy, and they know that when they are engaging in tragic arrangements, preying on non-white people, that they are subjecting them to unjust harm. They're subjecting them to violence under the system of racism, white supremacy. The other thing as well was I remember listening to Dr. Welsing speak once, one of her lectures, and she talked about the effect that white people have on non-white people, especially in discussions about racism, white supremacy. And I believe you and EJ and Smoking Damages were kind of speaking about it earlier. But she talked about when a white person enters a room, the mood, the discussion changes. Non-white people become somewhat fearful of speaking any longer. They no longer they don't want to offend the white person in the room. The discussion totally becomes dishonest, and the non-white people in the room are unable to speak accurately and effectively about the conditions that they experience under the system of racism, white supremacy. I believe white people know this because they know that they are white people, and they know that a system of racism, white supremacy exists. She also mentioned tragic arrangements. She mentioned, so when it comes down to it, the non-white person's gonna have to choose either countering the system of racism, white supremacy. I'm paraphrasing, or choose to protect or be with the white person that they're in an arrangement with. Because when you're talking about countering the system of racism, white supremacy, that ultimately means going against the white person, going against white people who practice racism, going against racist suspects, and that could be the white person that you're in a so-called relationship with. And when it comes down to it, will the non-white person be able to think effectively to do that? Will they be able to speak honestly about that? They'll be too afraid to offend their the white person that they're in a tragic arrangement with. And for me, that really solidified why tragic arrangements, white people, non-white people being in relationships with white people, why white people preying on non-white people shouldn't be happening under a system of racism, white supremacy. It ultimately prevents non-white people from thinking, speaking, and acting accordingly and accurately against the system of racism, white supremacy. That's all I had to share right now. Thank you for letting me speak.
The concept of race must be believed, partially, to make victims more susceptible to be preyed upon by white supremacists, because they particularly have a sexual race fetish. And so that alone exposes this person is practicing racism. You're treating me like I am a race. When they give the idea that they have mixed race children, counter racist logic reasoning should automatically ask the question, how can you be part white supremacist, a person dedicated to the domination and abuse of people based on color, and a part victim of racism, white supremacy? Mixed race. The victims aren't a race. The victims are a group of victims. By the way, the word family comes from the word meaning group of slaves. So when people talk about black family, in a sense, even that is mythology. There's never been the black family, the black community, the black neighborhood, the black collective. These things are lies from the first lie, that race is what you are, when race comes from hundreds of years after the establishment of and the maintenance of white supremacy racism to justify what they had created, the monstrosity of non-white people, and our reaction to white supremacy racism, domination, and abuse based on color. So to promote it is to promote its maintenance, is to promote its further personality development.
That reminds me of why I appreciate Dr. Amos and Wilson so much. He always talks about, not he always talks about, but he mentions your reason, and how the system must program us to think like them, to use their insane reasoning, because their insane reasoning is what they use to justify continuing our destruction and terrorization by them. So they teach us that we are so-called individuals, and they teach us that, and when when you're taught that you are an individual, and you're constantly met with mistreatment and failures because you can't achieve what you've been told that you should be achieving, what you should be thriving in, despite your color, you should be able to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. Because we live in so-called America, where anyone can start from the bottom and become, Donald Trump. But when we were met with these lies, and we try to actually exist like these lies are true, we become even more deranged, even more crazy. And then that it develops what he calls, and what we also use this term a lot, self-hate, because you begin to feel incompetent. Everything you try and want to do, you can't do, because white supremacy has designed it to make your existence like a billion times harder. So we become to see ourselves as like failures, losers, and that we see ourselves as incompetent. Then we begin to see other Black people as incompetent, and then you fast forward to a reality we're in right now, where it's so easy for non-white people, Black people, to harm each other because we've been so massively programmed by the system.
The whole concept of individualism and everything that you can build from that, every other concept in the mind you can build from that, and the concepts in the mind um, begin to attach to the emotional expectation, to the psychological aspiration. And then when you're met with the group dynamic that you don't know, the mysterious hand of the usual suspects, putting a cap on your educational aspirations, your emotional desire for advancement in your so-called occupation, career. When you're a parent, now color, that's even incorrect. Oh, it's my color. No, you're ignoring the hostility of one group against another. Again, you're a priori, or before it all, just to have the concept of individualism. Emotionally, intellectually, psychologically, you have to deny the reality of what white supremacy racism is. And then you will be confused as hell as it functions, as they function on you. When just because you have a great idea for a business, now you got to sit in a room with white people to say yes or no with the money to get the idea to become a reality. No, it's not your color. It's now you're in the room with the people who are already hostile against you, having a constructive result, especially one that'll solve a problem that they have created and they maintain. Food desert. Distribution comes down to white people saying yes or no on those trucks, even buying them, getting the loan to buy them. Oh, you forgot they practice racism in finance too. Whoops. So you have cognitive dissonance. Now you're confronted with a lifetime of believing a lie. And it wasn't even like you were deliberately believing a lie. You just ignored the truth. You just didn't start from knowing what white supremacy racism is. So now you have a psychological condition of you aspired and hoped for things that were never going to be a reality. And now you're crushed to find that a hostile group of people who don't give a damn about your individualness are set against you, having a constructive result, especially if it's solving a problem they've created. the prayer in the world, all the Jesus, whoever else. I don't want to just stick on that. You got to deal with what is white supremacy and how does it work? And how do we counter that? First way to counter it is don't aspire for things that are not real. Dismantle the lie in your mind that you can have success while subject to racism. That is a lie. I know it feels good. I know it's a great psychological aspiration, but it's an opium dream. It's a drug. It's not going to materialize into reality because it's going to come down to having to deal with what white people do and what they have done and will continue to do. And what are you going to do about it? We have to take back the first step, the desire. What do we want to do? If what we want to do denies the reality of white supremacy racism, you shouldn't want to do that. That's going to crush you. That's going to destroy you psychologically and drain your physical life energy on the way. If you want to make black people feel good while subject to white supremacy racism, why do you want to do that? Why do you just want to make us feel good? Oh, well, I want to be a comedian because I want... What? In a war, you want to make people laugh who aren't responding correctly to a war? That's a hell of a desire. Who put that in your mind? These are the things we do to dismantle the system of white supremacy racism. Dismantle them in our minds. Because we know, Mr. Biko said, greatest weapon in the hand of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. Everybody in this room is oppressed. Have you been dismantling the greatest weapon today? Your own mind? Have you been telling yourself the truth and taking down life ambitions that you ain't got no business aspiring to in the middle of a war? You save and give money to people to make them feel good on certain days to make them feel loved? What? What? What fantasy are you living on? That's father? Really? Who told you that story? Oh, Disney. I remember that. I remember that.
Yeah, it's very tragic. Uh, Most victims of racism, of white supremacy, exist. Like the things we see on TV, the things we see in Area 3 are actually accurate. We see the way the so-called families behave, and we try to mimic those families. But if the system showed the reality of our situation, how being classified as black is one of the worst experiences one can endure on this planet, if we're telling the truth. Yeah, we can be so-called resilient, we can maintain, but being classified as black super, 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 super sucks. Um, Me speaking personally, honestly, for myself.
I'm black and I'm proud. I'm unapologetically black, right? It is what I am,
Got
right?
2 minutes.
Um,
Yep. I didn't hear any names called. Mm-mm. I didn't hear any names called. Go ahead, Ria.
appreciate that. Shout out to the host, co-host. But yeah, I get where you're going with it, right? But it is where we are today. I can agree with a lot of what the co-host was saying, right? But we are where we are. A lot of us black people, I mean, we got to get past that classification and stuff and get past what the gist is, right? We get played at it. We still caught up in a lot of feelings when I mean, it's about black empowerment and ownership in the system we in. We can get to, and I know that's a slippery slope, but a lot of it is we're not playing the game that they're playing, right? They use a lot of us to buy into their game because people are worried about their interests. We don't have our so-called leaders in our community, our black leaders, reaching back, giving back, empowering, and vice versa, right? You get caught up in that game of race, right, and feelings, and we get talked about. Oh, it's just it was back down to the rabbit hole conversation. So we are where we are, but exactly what are you saying about beating the system, right, of white supremacy? Is that because
Hold
he
on one
went the
second.
classification?
Wait. Let me ask you. I mean, not ask you a question, but you mentioned something about black leaders. Let me make a suggestion. Be your own leader.
Well, I wouldn't call them leaders. I would say more so people
Mm-mm-mm.
at
No, no,
the
no.
top of
Be
their.
your own leader. Be up.
Oh,
Don't. Okay.
I am,
There you go.
but I mean people that are in the high earners, right, in our quote
Mm-mm-mm.
unquote
Don't
race.
focus on. Yeah, but don't focus on them. You be your own leader. Don't worry about what those other people are doing. You be a leader. You be your own leader. You see what I'm saying? Or no?
Got a question for re-ups. Do you have a definition of, or do you believe in the system of white supremacy racism?
There's a system in place. I'll be careful with how I would use it, but there's a system in place, and racism does exist, right? That white supremacy quote unquote system does exist, but I more so say it's on
Did you
paper.
hear what I
It's the
said? Like a definition.
Yeah, you mean the aspect that controls every aspect of our lives? Yeah, that
I
system.
dig it.
Yeah.
So the concept of the room is to um, explore really how to identify that we've been given by the white supremacists the ideal that we are a race, and that leads us into wasting time and energy into solving the problem of their hostility against us to maintain their domination and abuse. Also in the room, it was revealed that the concept of race has been promoted in order to distract us away from justice, balance between people. And instead, we end up promoting concepts and ideas that really maintain their domination of non-white people and abuse, and cause us to waste time and energy fighting one another and other victims of racism, other non-white people. One of the things the racists have done is they've put words into our minds so that we are not able to accurately focus on what they do to maintain the status quo or the existence of domination and abuse based on color. We try to avoid using metaphors or words that we just assume we all understand, or phrases we assume that we all understand. So when we try to address this problem, we use the concepts found in the code and in the word guide that accompanies the code. We recommend people look into this as being the solution to the problem, ultimately, of white supremacy racism. Everything's going to get back to the code that revealed this concept that race is racism, and the only functional form of racism is white supremacy racism. And in order to dismantle and dissolve white supremacy racism. We have to use the most accurate terms to define it for what it is and how it works so we can strategize against what they do and how they do it.
So
Salt, you want to pick the next speaker?
If Riep wants to respond, go ahead, Riep.
yeah, so I think that this the whole structure boils down to money, right? You got a small few at the top that have created this game, right? They use racism with white people who really don't matter, right? They let them play that game while they were just slowly but surely making it up to today's game where it's just class, right? So I kind of hear that class thing, but we know the system, right? I more so believe I could get past feelings, and if we're talking about that system is legislatively, right, not living up to the laws of the land. So that's where I'm kind of confused, because if that's the game, then and we know it's a money game, then it's about ownership, right? Once we all on an even playing field, quote unquote, with economics, since that's the game that's what it's really about, then want to be somewhat equal at that point, and you can move on to the because me with the technology we have is just being humans, right? We should be further along, but we do petty fight with racism and petty wars about land disputes, all that kind of about religion, all that kind of stuff, and we're still primitive. So I get the bigger, but you know.
Thank you for that. Go ahead, the Black.
Hi, hi. Um,
The Black is going first, and then Black Native. Okay, thank you.
Apologize.
Okay. So,
No problem. Go ahead, the Black.
um, I think there was like a couple of portions. I think is it evolutionist, where he was talking about success or concepts of success. Um, and those like concepts being dominated by white supremacy, racism, um, especially like pertaining, I guess, to education and employment and maybe business. Um, so I was curious, since we are in the system and we're born in the system, it's already here. Um, like, how does one operate then? Like, I'm just curious about his thoughts. Like, how does one operate? Does excuse me? Does one um, does one pursue things like education, like business? Um, does one solely pursue? I don't know if those things can because I know there are people that make their education business and whatever, like solving the problem. Like I think Gus T. I think Neely Fuller had a job, but I think he pursued like writing the books, and I think Dr. Welsing also had a job, but she was also pursuing um, solving the problem. And I remember Dr. Welsing on the cast. I think she said like that when they first published, or when they were first publishing the book, the code book, that her and Neely Fuller, and when they started the some of the sessions that they would do, that she thought that they would be like successful really quickly. Like she thought people were going to take the code, take the concepts, and be successful. Like she thought they thought it would be a matter of years that this would like transform things. So I'm kind of wondering like what evolutionist was getting at in that the concepts of success, education. Do we pursue these things? Do we? Because even if we pursue them, or we pursue attempting to replace the system as like our number one business or education or job, that doesn't guarantee success, I would say. Yeah. So I'm wondering, like, how do we balance? Like, does he have suggestion in balancing that and how we think? Yeah. Hopefully that's a hopefully that's a question, and hopefully he can maybe expound on that. Thank you.
I think if you look in the code to counter the system of white supremacy racism suggests that we pursue being universal man and universal woman, or universal man for, with, towards universal woman, and universal woman with, for, and towards universal man. To be your best that you could possibly be in whatever you endeavor as your paid occupation. That's a normal, I think. That's a, not normal, I should say. That's a people aspiration that I think people are kind of born with. But desires. If we desire to solve a major problem among people by avoiding dealing directly with the system of white supremacy racism and what to do about them, as a part of our solving of the problem, then that'll leave you disillusioned in the end, because you're still going to have to deal with them. They are dedicated to maintaining the domination and abuse. Not just domination, but abuse. So to be a good employee sweeping the floor, I think that pisses them off. You should be dejected. You should be like, F this floor. F this job. That would be a part of the self-abuse. If you blame yourself, if you blame the condition of black people on unknown forces or your family, self-destruction, implosion or explosion, that's what I'm talking about. They sell us concepts behind words that really have psychological, like a dope effect. Like, it smell good. Those words sound great. That figurative language is very effective in creating physical responses, psychological responses, sometimes unseen. But if they're lies, if you, oh man, I didn't realize that white people are going to make decisions about this thing I wanted and this thing I thought I would get from hard work and dedication. I didn't know that it would come down to these people just want to harm me. These people just want to deny me, sabotage me, even though I'm attempting to be righteous. Lord, you said no weapon formed. Well, this weapon can't be. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. I think the psychological devastation from denial or deliberate ignorance, or they simply lied to you about what it is and how it works. That's what I want to prevent. I'm not against whatever you want to deem success, but make sure what you as a non-white person deem success is based on the reality of what white supremacy racism is already and how it works, how they maintain. We're going to harm you if you're black and you want to do something constructive. You're going to be harmed. You're going to be sabotaged. You're not going to get fulfillment. You're not going to get what you deserve through hard work and dedication. Please don't let me be the one to tell you before a white psych somewhere in a room has to tell you. It don't work like that. And that's what's devastating us, in my opinion. That's what's driving a bunch of the other dysfunction. We just really don't know what reality is, what it is, not how we feel about it, not what it could be, not what it ought to be based on some written down stuff on paper. So if we can be simple and reality based in our description of what racism is and how it works, we'll get rid of a lot of the concepts and psychological attachments to false ideas, things just that aren't real based on what we do know about what racism is and how it works.
Go ahead, Black Native.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. I just want to say we're dealing with wickedness in high places. I just want to put that out there. White supremacy and racism is a construct. We all understand that. White people are the biggest manipulators and gaslighters known to man. And what the brother said, we have to understand, we have to deal in reality, not what we want, not what we hope, but what it is. And they have been able to put a veil over the whole planet under the guise of white supremacy. I believe the United States is capitalist and then white supremacy. It goes hand in hand. They taught the lowest of their own people, as long as your white skin is of value, you can be a homeless bum living on the street. But as long as you have that whiteness, you're above black people, and they stand by that. It's a religion. It's part of who they are. It's their culture. It's a religion. They live by it, even the lowest of the low, and we have to understand that. Living in this country, I don't believe not one black person in this country or in the planet should be confused as to what we're dealing with. I'm still in awe that we are literally still trying to break down what we are going through physically, emotionally in this country. If history hasn't taught us anything, 400 or going on to 500 years of dealing with this group of people and how they treated us and how they treated our ancestors and how they do us today, and they haven't had our best interests at heart, they never will. And we have to understand that. We can't hope, we can't dream, we can't wish it away. We can't think if we just, get along that they'll stop. That's not their agenda. I just watched a video, and it was a girl speaking about what's happening in Mississippi, how they're trying to bring back Jim Crow laws, which I heard they did. I'm not sure. I just watched a video of they were having some type of Senate meeting, and a Republican, I don't know if he was from Tennessee or Kentucky, spoke about bringing back hangings. This is what we're dealing with. And we have to understand that I didn't read Neely Fuller's The Code of Conduct, but I have read Francis. I have the book, the ISIS Papers. But say if nobody read those books in this room, just as living here and experiencing white supremacy and racism, just daily lives, your everyday life, from the time I can remember going through it, from the time I was probably maybe 5 or 6. I mean, it's something that you're going to experience. And I hear a lot of people in these spaces, black people, they said they never dealt with white supremacy or racism until they got to college. Kudos to you. I don't know how. Maybe they just didn't recognize it, because it comes in many forms. It's very mischief. It's very sometimes overt and sometimes covert. And you have to understand it when you see it. It could be aggressive. It could be passive aggressive. It's so many layers to this.
30 seconds.
Okay. And I want to know, us having these intellectual conversations, what are we going to do? Because like we said, race is a social construct. Us as who we are, the people of this planet, what are we going to do, and what are we willing to do to stop this for our grandchildren, our great grandchildren, our great great grandchildren? What's the solution? Our land.
The solution, in my opinion, based on observation, the United Independent Compensatory Code System concept by Neely Fuller Jr., in my opinion, is the way we replace the system of white supremacy racism with the system of justice. One thing to remember, what racism, if you don't understand what white supremacy racism is, if you don't understand that, what it already is, domination and mistreatment based on color. We are in the refined stage where victims are taught to deny reality for psychological comfort, for physical comfort, while being dominated and abused based on concepts of color and associations with color, dominated by and abused by racist man, racist woman, and racist child, collectively the people who classify themselves as white. This is the definition and definitions of the reality we live in. From that reality, from that simple speech, that's how we address this problem. And one of the major ways of solving it is to exchange ideals on how to best go about replacing the system of white supremacy, racism, with balance between people, seeing that no people are mistreated for any reason, and the person that needs the most help gets the most constructive help in interactions between people.
Yeah, and I was going to answer the Black Africans question, but I'll still answer it because it's the answer to that question is, I would say, the same answer to how do we produce justice, how do we end the race war being waged against us. We have to first of all understand that we are in a race war. We have to not be confused, because my entire existence I've wanted to help Black people, but it wasn't until I understood that I was in a system of white supremacy why that was such a difficult task for me to do. So now that I have the understanding that, oh, I'm in a race war, the way I exist on this planet makes more sense. People have this idea of counter racism that's going to make you miserable or afraid or fearful, but the business of counter racism is supposed to make a victim of racism a scientist, a soldier, someone who understands the importance of money not being something that is going to help us to solve all our problems, but money being a tool. It teaches us to be, it encourages us and suggests us to be more soldier-like and understanding how to interact with people who are also being warred upon, our fellow victims. How to attempt to treat each other with more courteousness. It also teaches us the importance of espionage, of what to do when you are around people who may be racist, white people, the importance of asking questions. And when you are less confused about the system of white supremacy by either listening to Neely Fuller, I would suggest just reading the book if that's possible. So when you are on the job, you understand that you're in danger, and you understand the value of just keeping to yourself and doing your job to the best of your abilities and going home. It teaches you the importance of eliminating a lot of nonsense we've been programmed to do from birth. So-called holidays, we worship the so-called tradition, the ritual of going to the mall and shopping and picking up, acquiring junk to feel good. It suggests eliminating a lot of that and focusing on becoming people who are wanting to solve problems, learning how to solve problems, learning things of constructive value. That is how we're going to solve this problem, by becoming scientists, soldiers, not a person working in a lab, but a person who is observing reality and existing in reality. Not what we've been taught to do, to say, yeah, I'm having a awesome day. No, I exist on a planet that is being waged upon. In all areas where there are non-white people, they are being exploited, raped, and murdered by racists who are dedicated to terrorizing us forever, until an effective number of us become soldier-like, are willing enough to say, hey, racist man and racist woman, it's been that time. You have to kill all of us, or we're going to work together to produce justice, to end this race war, to guarantee no one is being mistreated and the people who need help the most receive constructive help. If we can't come to that agreement, no more. We don't care about Super Bowls anymore. We don't care about any of this stupid shit you told us we should care about. We're gonna produce justice, or you're gonna kill all of us. And while you're trying to kill all of us, we're gonna be trying to kill as many of you. But we understand that we don't have the weaponry to win you guys in a firefight. But we're not gonna die like rats. But that's what we're doing right now. When we don't counter racism logically, seriously, we are just being treated and killed like rats. Worse than rats, I would say. And I could keep going forever, but I'll stop there.
Global system of white supremacy racism. Dr. Francis Cress Welsing would say local, regional, national, global. If you don't understand what white supremacy racism is locally, regionally, nationally, and globally, and how it works locally, regionally, nationally, and globally, everything else that you think you understand will only confuse you. When you talk about it, it will be confusing. It will not lead to material, quantifiable, results-driven, counter-racist logic. Who's next on the mic? Go ahead, Riep.
So yeah, it's basically about genetic annihilation, right? And then effective, if you were going to go with Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, right? And then affecting policy locally, regionally, and then, nationally, right? To participate in our genocide and ethnocide. So
To me, if you want to combat that, I would say again, you go back to Neely Fuller, you get on code, which I was saying at first, right? And I get you're trying to transcend past race, but if we're trying to effectively work on it, we all have to get on code. That means people in positions of power, um, legislatively, intellects in school, people sitting in government. Those people have to get on code because a lot of them, right, the people that are melanated, people of color, a lot of them do the bidding for white supremacy. Whereas you look at them, white people are the fuck on code, right?
So again, remind remind you, um, our focus isn't on others; it's just on ourselves. It's just ourselves on how to dismantle and dissolve the lying concept that there is a genetic or biological marker for race or color. There's no genetic or biological marker of race or color. No genetic nor biological marker. To be white is not a genetic or biological reality. It is a decided upon, codified way of thinking about themselves. Themselves who? Those who have decided to dominate and abuse others based on the concept of color. They classify themselves and all newcomers as white based on this dedication of behavior, of thought, speech, and action that will ultimately maintain, refine, and further expand what already is the domination and abuse of people based on color. That has never been that genetic mutation to be able to be qualified to be classified as white. Has never been a dominant physiological marker. Race, the dedication part to abuse and domination, that's choice. That's a choice. The dedication is a choice. We just don't know any dedication of that magnitude as non-white people. That's why we think that we must be genetic. We must be biological in our dysfunction. And once we accept that lie, we help to maintain the domination and abuse of people based on color. That's the concept this is built on. This exchange of ideas on how to replace these lies with truth, to undo what they've done in us. Go ahead, Riyadh.
Yeah, I get what you're saying about the contract, right? Kind of lost me there, but back to what I was saying. If you're trying to beat that system, I get what you're saying. You're in that system, but I mean, what else is it to do? You're saying, okay, just be the best you, but then you're saying we got to look at the system. It's losing me a bit here.
Yep. Just go ahead and read the code. Just
So,
get your
been
copy
there,
of the
been
United Independent
been there,
Code.
been there, done that. But I'm
Yeah.
speaking on the
So
here and now.
just stick
I
to the
mean,
code. Stick to the code right now. Exchange of ideas on how to best do this, on how
so
to
yeah, that's what I
replace
was
their
doing. So
lives with
I was
truth.
just saying that black people, especially here in America, if we're speaking on regionally and nationally, need to get on code, right? Because I mean, that's just the point. Others use their platforms and their interests to help their code, quote unquote code, right? Do their bidding. Nobody does that for black people, especially here in America. That's the code, right? The same game they play, you play until we get to the point where they say, okay, it's no need for this because right now we keep playing the same game. It's a losing game, which goes back to
Go ahead, Black nationalist.
It's actually Black Native, but thank you. You keep speaking on we have to replace the system of white supremacy with a system of justice. We understand that. How do we get to that? Because we have Black people that are in office who are not on code, who don't want to play to replace the system of white supremacy with a system of justice. We literally just
Black
had.
native.
Can you hear me?
Black native. I have a question for you.
Right.
Do you have a definition that you work from when you say the system? Do you have a definition of the system of white supremacy racism?
Yeah, the system is everything that's around us. It's the school, it's the finance, it's war, it's everything. The whole American United States of America is based off of a system of white supremacy. It affects every aspect of our lives. And like you said, that's how I see it as. I don't see anything that we're doing in this country that is not conducive or doesn't have white supremacy entwined in it.
Okay, for the sake of context, um, anyone who has the code who's spoken already, go to the definition of the code. If you have a word guide, you can go to the definition of, I'm sorry, the definition of white supremacy racism. A global system of people. Well, I had it global from Gus T. Renegade's definition, which I borrowed from in my understanding based on my observation. It fits. System of people who classify themselves as white and are dedicated to dominating and abusing everyone who they classify in the known universe as not white. That's what exists, a system of people. Not schools, not finance, but people functioning in areas of life that are identified as economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. People functioning in every area of life, functioning as every life-sustaining institution, people functioning dedicated to domination and abuse, the maintaining, the further refining, and the expansion, if potentially able, of that basic premise that governs all life, directly or indirectly, on the planet. That's what we are dealing with.
Can I respond?
How to deal with white people and what it means to be white. This group was opened to dismantle the concept of black as being a race
are you
and
guys
the
Black Americans?
corresponding ideologies, ideals of class, ideals of personality that come from this lie that the racists have created. Dr. Tommy Curry in The Man Not, Chapter 3, very extensive in his research in revealing that the racists, hundreds of years after establishing white supremacy racism, came up with concepts and ideals about each so-called race that today we consider to be class or consider as classes. this ideal of foundational Black Americans, Caribbean Africans, Southern, Northern niggas. All these are lies from the racist. They all have their origin in the father, mother of lies. You cannot make them true by being able to better articulate a lie. These things are not true. Paul Mooney said the difference is you got dropped off first. That's all. That's all. The uniting factor or the common denominator. Basic math. The common denominator is we've all been dominated and abused based on color. You didn't build anything if it was built off your enslavement. Their drive and will to make you a slave built buildings and houses and farms and whatever else. Whatever else. Rape didn't build a beautiful child. Rape is rape. That's what this is about. This space is about starting with the truth, confronting these lies that the racists have created for racial classification confusion. They've divided the victims amongst themselves in our own mind. Class is a concept when you're all in prison. There's no rank among the slaves. There's just different duties, different administrations of the ultimate power. That's the biggest dynamic we should be, all non-white people should be looking at. Look at us compared to them. That one little itty bitty group. Control how we all think about ourselves and one another. Really? I'm an African American. What does that mean? What is an American? When did anybody ever do truth and justice? That's the American way, last time I checked. When has that ever happened? Never. Never, no, never. Never, no, never. It was always a bunch of raping and a bunch of murdering. At all times and in all places. Maintained with the gilding of hypocrisy. The Gilded Age. So no, we will not be promoting the concept. We're going to argue about the lies because this whole space was created to expose the lies. We're not going to promote the lies. Slaves are slaves. No matter what classes we've been allowed to believe ourselves to be in. Slaves are slaves. If you've read Dr. Tommy J. Curry's or had the audiobook, The Man Not, put your hand down. If you've read Dr. Amos Wilson, Falsification of African Consciousness, put your hand down. If you have a copy of the United Independent Compensatory Code System concept that you can open up to right now, put your hand down. If you've currently watched over 10 hours of television this week, keep your hand up. Okay. So the concept that this group was started for was to reveal the lie that race is a reality other than the white race, the white supremacists, not to promote the lies of racial classification, confusion. If you do not know what that is, type that in your Google search, racial classification confusion. Neely Fuller Jr. The code. Won't take long. 05, can you grab that and read it when you find it? But go ahead, it's on you now.
I'll look for. I'm on my twins, but he has the book as well, so I'll find it. But I'll be very brief. Bobby Wright, also an excellent counter-racist scholar and soldier in the war effort to end the race war. But Bobby Wright, we are in a race war, and we are the only ones who don't know it. Referring to people who have been classified as black by racist men and racist women, and that is very on display every day from my observations on social media and reality.
Smoking, did you have anything to add? Okay, Rios.
Yeah, I had a phone call, so I didn't hear probably like the last 30, 45 seconds. But yeah, black is not just my race, right? I mean, you can go with that, but that's my ethnicity, right? That's my culture. That's what I know. That's the construct of what we're in, right? I'm not understanding how you want to beat the system and you're not trying to organize for any to be on code to actually fight that, right? It's just, okay, we're going to talk about it, but like again, how, right?
Let's go one thing at a time. We'll start at the top. When you
Get it?
said black is your
We
thing,
just
what do you mean black is your thing? Try to be specific too.
That's my ethnicity. That's my culture, right?
What
Like a
pause?
race.
What does your ethnicity and culture mean when you say
I'm amalgamated. I'm a mix of a whole bunch of things, and that's what I am. I've been. That's
okay?
what my lineage tells
When
me,
you
right?
say
It's a
when
culture
you
behind
say
that, right? How
when
I
you say
eat,
you're
how I communicate, how I practice what I believe, my moral standing, right? And being here in America
pause
with that. Hold on, being
pause
here in
for a
America
second.
with that.
Let's just go one thing at a time.
Yeah. Hold on a second. We need to slow things down, be up. Um, allow you to speak, but please just slow things down because we all want to understand what you're saying. That's all.
So when you said the way you speak, you're speaking English right now, right? Everybody, we're speaking English, correct? Yep, correct.
Yes,
Unmute
I'm
your
here. I'm
mic.
sorry. I was doing something. I'm
No
sorry.
problem.
What was the question?
When you said the way you eat food, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, you eat from the basic so-called food groups, right? Starches, meats, or you just do certain. What part of the way you speak and the way you eat is the
That's
black part? And what
That's
is
a
it?
that's AAVE. That's what majority of what I speak, right? I mean, it's just broken English,
What?
some English, but it's AAVE, right? What I eat is reclassified as soul food, right?
Pause. Both of those things are directly and indirectly related
Related
to.
to slavery, right
Hold
here.
up, pause. Nope,
That's my
pause.
history.
Let me finish. To what white people do or have done, correct? Even the designation, A something,
Well, you
they
asked me
said
what
you.
was American, and I was getting ready to lay all that out for you, but
No,
we
I
gonna
didn't
slow.
ask you that part yet. I just said you said was black. We're gonna go to the one by the time. Now those things are all directly and indirectly intimately linked to what white people do or have done, correct or not correct?
That's the system, right?
Okay. Now, the next part you said, Go ahead. You're black. It's your thing. And then go ahead. That's another reason why it's good to slow down because you forget.
right? And then here, no, that's my culture, that's my ethnicity, right? That's what I said, right? And then I was going to get on to being American and what Black Americans have actually fought for morally, right? The things that my
No,
culture.
no, 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 no.
Oh,
We didn't ask what black. What is a
well,
black
well,
American? What is a black American?
me, an
Okay, now
amalgamation
you
of
are a
things, right?
person
A
who.
descendant of slavery, right here
So
in this
both of
country.
those things are. They were founded in
That
mistreatment by
listen,
white people,
that's what I am.
domination
That's
by
most
white
of the
people, right?
globe. We have a
So
land
you're so
of law
you're
of
a
the land.
victim of
I mean,
racism.
I mean,
So that's what
no,
makes you the most of
listen.
what you are, right? You're a
No,
victim
that's
of
the way you want to
racism.
frame it. That's your interpretation, right? I'm proud
No,
of
we
my
just
story.
going with you.
Wait, just calm down and let me finish. I'm proud of my black ethnicity and my story lineage right here on this soil. The things that my ancestors fought for. The
Pause
things.
at the word pride.
Hold
We're gonna
on,
pause at
calm
pride,
down.
then we're gonna
No,
go to
no, no,
fight.
no. Calm
You
down,
said
right?
you are proud of being dominated and abused by white people. You're proud of that. What are you proud of
EJ.
in being dominated?
EJ, he does not see himself, I don't think, as a victim. He's calling himself an African American.
Okay, I
He
took the
has the
word
right to
victim
call
out.
himself. Yep, but he has that
Right.
right to do
I
that.
know. And we should examine whether that word is related to other words that are much more descriptive or not. Why not call a thing exactly what it is? If that's exactly what it is, we called Thomas Jefferson a raping racist because that's exactly what he did. And that's exactly who he was. I'm not trying to debate or dispute. I'm trying to let's see if what we're saying matches the reality of our existence. We're proud to be, we were forced into English, forced into building,
What are you,
forced
sir?
into feeding them.
What are you, sir? What do you
I'm a
consider
victim
yourself?
of racism. That's primarily what I am.
Okay, are you
Everything
from?
that makes up
Are
my
you a descendant of
culture,
American chattel slavery?
the formalized
Are you a descendant of
version
American
of the
chattel slavery?
establishment of white supremacy
See, because this is
racism,
the problem. Your
is
interpretation
a
of things,
part of
right? And
my history.
I think it's the interpretation of things, right? You just interpreted that what I said interpreted to be I was a victim, right? I don't see it that way, right?
I took
That's
the
my
word victim
lineage.
out,
Wait.
but
That's my
you said
lineage. I'm proud of
you
my
are
amalgamation,
culture.
right? They made the right. Hold on. The history or the indoctrination that you were led to believe made you believe that they were victims and that they were rape babies and all that kind of stuff. Because that's what I got of it, right? What I've learned about mine, 50,000 patents, right? Through the worst atrocities, you come out with a rich culture that's globally exported, right? I'm talking about some of the best music, best intellects, best culture,
For
athletically. Man, we can keep going.
dominated
Hold on.
people.
Wait a minute. He
That's called
dominated what you
exploitation.
listen.
That's called rape, right?
Can I finish what I'm
If
saying?
you build your kingdom
Can
on
I
raped
finish
and
what I'm
exploited
saying?
people
But
who
what's
you
your
are still
no.
saying
That's why I
still
asked you
getting
what you
exploited,
were and where you were from, right? Because maybe you
I'm
have a
from the
different
beginning
interpretation.
and from everywhere I've ever been and everywhere I've yet to be.
Okay, so you one of them kind of people. All right, bet.
They classify me as black, just like you.
And this is why we got to get to it because it's people like with your train of thought that are actually up there, quote unquote, not fighting against that system that are going right along with it. Because it sounds like
Okay,
you
let
don't
me
have an
read.
understanding of it. That's just me, right? That system that you're talking about, those books that you read, the interpretations are a bit off. Because every one of them that you stated, I've read. Maybe my interpretation's different.
What part of the falsification of African consciousness struck you as the most relevant for calling yourself a proud African American?
I call myself Black American, right? I'm Black.
Is
Not saying that
black
I don't. Hold on. Not saying
separated
that I.
from
Hold on.
is
Not.
black separated from the domination and abuse of people who classify themselves as white? Is there any part of it that you can tell me tangibly what people think, say, and do that is separated from what white people have said have thought, and have done. That's black in you. Any part of it separate from them in their abuse?
What do you mean? Is any part of it separate?
Is there anything that you can say that is black that has nothing to do with the direct and indirect domination and abuse of people based on color? Is there any part of that that has nothing to do and has been totally unaffected by white supremacy racism?
I get where you're trying to go with this, but that's not what I'm saying, right? You're trying to conflate two things. I get that question.
Thank you for your answer.
But you're conflating two things.
This is from the United Independent Compensatory Code System concept. I do hope this can
Because
alleviate
you're trying to have a
some.
classification, and this classification has been indoctrinated to make you to believe this way. That's not where I'm going with it. It is what it is.
Let him
This is
finish.
what I'm saying.
Re-up.
It is. Oh shit! I didn't hear. You might have to drop.
It's small area. No worry. So this is from the United Independent Compensatory Code System concept by Neely Fuller Jr. And I do hope it does alleviate some confusion. So this is out of the 6 major racist strategies. This is the first one that Neely Fuller Jr. has identified and written here. Number 1, I'm only going to read this one. Okay, this is the one that was requested by the co-host. Racial classification confusion. The white supremacist racists classify people by color, non-color, based on the use of the word race. There's no reason to be a member of a race except to mistreat someone because of color or non-color. The only reason for being a member of a race is to practice racism, white supremacy. Race is racism. The only reason for practicing racism is to gain so-called benefits by mistreating people based on the so-called color classification of these people. A person who functions as a member of a race is a racist. During the existence of white supremacy racism, however, only a white person can function as a race member, the white race racist. The white supremacist, racist man and racist woman collectively make sure that they use whatever so-called racial classifications they can think of that will best help them to control the thought, speech, and action of the non-white people of the known universe. They do this to give greater strength and focus to the system of white supremacy. This is one of the basic ways that the white supremacists establish, maintain, expand, and or refine racial classification confusion through illusion. Question: what can you as an individual non-white person do about racial classification confusion? Answer: as long as white supremacy racism exists, consistently use the terms white people, non-white, black, brown, red, tan, beige, yellow, etc. And 3, white supremacists, races as the 3 racial classifications for the people of the known universe. Under all circumstances, avoid using any other terms. When others use any other so-called racial classifications other than white, non-white, and white supremacist races, ask for a detailed explanation that you can easily understand. Study all of the so-called racial classifications used by others. Ask questions about anything said that seems to be contradictory, confusing, and or non-explanatory. Beware of and or be alert for any so-called explanation that instead of clarity, focus, and logic only adds to the confusion. So just for total clarity, Neely Fuller Jr. suggests using the terms white, non-white, and white supremacist racist, and non-white meaning the colors that white people used to overtly call us, meaning black, red, yellow, beige, tan. Those are the non-white people classifications.
That was perfect. That was perfect. Avoid any confusing, non-explanatory answers about terms people use to describe racial classifications other than the aforementioned. As long as there's confusion, there will be no problem solved among those who claim to attempt or want to solve the problem. That's why we have to discover their lies and how they maintain their deception by feeding us confusion. They are supreme in the ability to rape and kill. They are supreme in their ability to create mass or weapons of mass destruction. They are supreme in their position to harm you economically, socially. They are supreme in having prisons that make money from harming non-white people. They are supreme in having a legal system to willingly incarcerate falsely at any time, any moment, any level of compliance, at any time, incarcerate you against your will, murder you in front of your so-called loved ones at any time against your will, lie to your offspring at any time against your will. They are supreme in their position. They are supreme in their ability to create ideas of how to harm other people and call it for profit. You know how hard you have to work to deliberately find a way to solve a problem by creating a bigger problem. You have to work really hard to do that, I imagine. I have never been able to do it. But I imagine that's brilliance. They are supreme. They are smarter than us to make people you dominate, create comfort for you, and not for themselves. Comfort for you. To create ideals that you're ugly, so make me rich by making you look better. And then have them praised 100 years later and movies made about them. While at the same time, they keep reminding you on your social media, hair relaxers and dyes have been known to cause cancer in black females. Endometriosis, uterine cancer, cysts, all the polyps, all the things that everybody who's had experience with a lot of black vagina, regular black female ailments at this point. At this point, if you've been in enough black vaginas, you know that there's peculiar problems with the black pussy. How did they do that? And there's no genetic or biological marker for color or race. But you create these diseases just for them. Just for them. Amazing. And we don't think they're supreme. We don't think they're supreme. Kwaku.
Excuse me. Thank you for allowing me to speak. Just really quickly, I just wanted to mention I guess, my view of the code book, Mr. Fuller's code. In my view, the code book is for people or non-white people who identify as victims of racism. So for those non-white people who do not agree that they are victims of racism, white supremacy, the code book is not something for them. That's my understanding of the code book. Now, it is a book of suggestions, and non-white people, victims of racism, don't have to agree with everything in the book. But first and foremost, if we're going to be talking about Mr. Fuller's code or Mr. Fuller's code, we have to understand that first. We have to understand: do you identify as a victim of racism, white supremacy? That should be the first thing. And then secondly, the last thing that I want to say very quickly is when talking about counter racism, when talking about Mr. Fuller's code book, it is important, essential to use words accurately, to know what you're saying and explain it. If we're not using terms correctly and accurately, that's the whole premise of this space is the white people who practice racism have given us a ton of words that many victims use all day long and don't really know what they mean. They're words that don't apply to us, but we use those words all the time. Thank you, O5, for reading the racial classification confusion, because that's something that came up in the space about black leaders. I think the evidence is abundant that nothing like that exists under a system of racism, white supremacy. And then lastly, this is and I'll mute my line. But counter racism, in my view, it starts with the individual. That the individual is responsible for themselves, and they can only affect themselves. So the idea or the concept, and I know a lot of other victims of racism who are well known for their attempts to counter the system of racism, white supremacy, have suggested, you know, unity and stuff like that. But in my view, when we're talking about counter racism, the work starts with the individual, and they can only control what affects themselves. So the code book is a textbook workbook for thought, speech, and or action for victims of racism, white supremacy. So it's about how you as an individual can change your thought, speech, and or action to speak accurately, honestly about the system of racism, white supremacy, to reveal truth and produce justice and correctness. That's all that I wanted to say for now. Thanks for letting me speak.
So if I could, yeah, when we talk about replace it with a system of justice, I mean, it's in the American Constitution. All men are created equal, which gets to the point. That good ethnicity, that black ethnicity that I was talking about, there's always fault, you know, for a mirror to live up to those ideals, which allows other non-black people to come over here and, have that freedom of speech to speak on that. So that's what I mean. You can have a different understanding of it, but always will be unapologetically black right here in America, this great American soil. Um, but those books are, after all, opinions of others. It's not law. It's not problems to be solved. That's why I will always ask, what's the call to action? You're speaking on defeating that system, but here that system is made to be by legislation, right? It's propagated up by this system. So how do you fight that legislation? We could read all these books, but if you're not reading the actual
What's your question?
laws, if you're
Re-ups.
not reading the actual
Re-ups. What are you
laws
getting to?
that's enforcing this quote unquote system, then it's all for naught. We just be sitting here talking about the text in a book.
Re-up. What are you getting to? What's your
I
question or
mean,
what's your
I said it.
contribution to racist racism?
Well, race is, a construct. Racism is the system that we're in, right? This racism.
Black native?
Thank you. Yeah. I believe more. I'm an Israelite. First, let me say that. So we understand that there is no land of black. Black is actually not. It's just a racial construct. We get all that. We understand there is no such thing as white people. We understand, and I definitely understand that we've been living globally in a system of people who want to classify themselves as white, use white to cause and cause harm and conflict on all other non-white people. I understand all of that. So basically, I get what you're saying. What re-up and what I'm saying is we understand this. We live here. We are in America, even this globe. This is a global thing, but we're here in the belly of the beast. How do we change the system? How do we change their system that they keep refining over and over and over? And we've been trying to penetrate through it. All of our leaders in the past assassinated, what have you. How
That's
do
your
we
question.
change this system to a system of justice when
That's
they
your
are not
question, right?
going to allow us to change it, because then that takes away from their whole system? So what
That,
are we doing?
that's your question. Your question is how do we replace the system of white supremacy racism with justice?
Yes.
Okay, so you have to go to www.producejustice.com. There you'll find a link to purchasing the book called The United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept by Neely Fuller Jr. And there'll be also a link to the Word Guide. That answers that question. Once and for all, it's on the board. Anybody needs reference to it, you can go back to the recording. Now, anyone else who wants to contribute to dismantling the lie of race, especially
I want to
today,
say,
under
I want to say
refined.
real quick that a way that we can eliminate, dismantle the system is by not having conflict with each other. Conflict, that's a big thing. Racism, white supremacy feeds off that.
Well, I hope I wasn't giving off conflict. I was just
Oh no,
asking.
no, no,
Okay,
no,
yeah,
no,
because
no,
I
no,
love
no, not
everybody
not
in
to
this
your
room.
response. I'm
Oh,
just in
okay,
the
okay.
space in general. Just just when non-white people get together, in spaces, etc. The conflict, whatever. No, no, no. I'm not speaking on you. Just saying in general.
No problem, sister.
I'm not dedicated to avoiding conflict, minimizing conflict. Conflict can't be avoided. All conflict cannot be avoided. That's why it's on the board. If anybody has that question or version thereof, the code, that's how we solve this problem. We're practicing the code at this moment by exchanging ideas on how best to do that, and particularly on the subject matter of racial classification confusion. Statements are made, opinions are given, questions are asked, all about this particular weapon of mass destruction called racial classification confusion. If you don't know what it is, again, www.producejustice.com. Get a link to purchasing the book, The United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept by Neely Fuller Jr. There will also be a link to the Word Guide, which is an accompaniment of the book. Racial classification confusion is one of the major strategies that racist men, racist women, and racist children promote and refine. Promote and refine to continue the confusion among the victims. In my opinion, anyone attempting to make up an ideal classification for themselves and you're non-white and you ignore or deny the reality that you have already been classified, and just that, classified. You've been taught that you are a certain class of subject. But again, if you don't believe you are a victim, this whole concept, this whole discussion is not for you. Don't give a man a problem he don't have, or a female a problem she don't have. No one's here to convince anyone that white supremacy racism exists. Only people who can do that are those who are best at practicing it. They're all classified as white. If anyone white in the room wants to prove it, do you have anything to say?
I was waiting for the white people to speak up. I know they're in the room. They're always listening. Uh, I just real quick, EJ, is it okay if I read something from the code book?
All the time.
Thank you. So I just wanted to read because I feel like it's a good relevant piece to read right now. I think everything in the code book's relevant. But so I'm going to read facts about the United Independent Compensatory Code System concept. This is page 47 from the Revised Expanded Edition, for the 2016 version. It says the title, the United Independent Compensatory Code System concept, refers to the basic means through which the people of the known universe, as individual persons, emphasis on individual, think, speak, and or act in order to compensate for those things which they, as individual persons, judge to be missing, that they have judged to be of value. When pertinent to those people of the known universe who are the victims of racism, white supremacy, each of the words used in the title of this book mean the following. United means that victims of racism, non-white people, who choose to be united are united in regards to their thoughts as to the need to resist and or eliminate racism, white supremacy. So united in their thoughts as to the need to resist and or eliminate racism, white supremacy. Independent means that each and every individual victim of racism is at all times, in all places, in all areas of activity, independent in regards to his or her choice of methods used to resist and or eliminate racism, white supremacy. This means that no person, white or non-white, has the just and correct authority to force and or command any victim of racism to adopt any means of speaking and or acting against racism other than the means that the individual victim chooses for him or herself. That's all. I believe that's also known as VGQ. But independent, no non-white person or white person has the correct authority to force and or command any other victim of racism, if you identify as one or if you're a non-white person, about how they should go about resisting the system of racism, white supremacy, or solving it. Compensatory means to make up for that which is missing, namely the revelation of truth and the use of truth in such a manner as to promote the production of justice and correctness. Justice and correctness is missing among the people of the known universe because the non-white people are dominated by and or tolerant of the racists. It is the racists who, in order to maintain the practice of racism, have produced the greatest and most effective system for promoting falsehood, non-justice, and incorrectness in the known universe. The white people who practice racism, white supremacy, have established the system of racism, white supremacy. They use it to dominate their subject people, the non-white people, and non-white people are currently being dominated by and or are tolerant of the racists. Now think about that. When, as it's often said, will your oppressor give you the tools to free yourself from your oppression? Code means that each individual victim of racism speaks and or acts to help eliminate racism by utilizing selections from a list of suggestions or from a combined list of suggestions designed to help an individual victim of racism accomplish that purpose. Uh, there's two more. Let me see. Okay, I'm going to stop right there. If anybody else wants to read the rest, they can pick up. But just my thoughts. The emphasis on individuals. So, in my view, I've given up on the idea of being, of needing all black people or all victims of racism to adopt the code. I believe that as an individual, I can do enough to counter the system of racism, white supremacy. As was mentioned, this book is full of suggestions on how to do that. If you, I realize that if I believe that I need all black people everywhere on the planet to get to adopt Mr. Fuller's code, that I'd be waiting a long time for justice to be produced. So what I believe is that as an individual, individuals need to adopt this code and implement it. That's how I believe. That's what I believe will counter the system. Apart from me as an individual following some of the suggestions in this book. So as the host stated, get your copy. Look at the suggestions. If some of them work for you, some of them don't. But I think that this for me has been a great starting point on how to counter the system. It has definitely allowed me to understand the system of racism, white supremacy, what it is and how it works, and I think that's vitally important to countering that system. That's all I have to say for now. I'm gonna drop back down to listener. Thank you.
Chanel?
Thank you. Peace to you, the host and co-host. It's my first time in your space, so thank you for allowing me to come up. This is actually for Black Native. How you doing, sis? And you talked about, what are some of the solutions? And I had to immediately come up and say what I remember Dr. Wilson saying. I really try my best to follow this. Dr. Wilson said, as individuals, as a young man was speaking just right before me, we all need to be scientists in that lab, trying to figure out what we need to do to replace it. Because if we knew how to replace the system of white supremacy with a system of justice, I think it already would have been done. But since we kind of just don't know, because I don't really think there's an answer, to be honest with you. But if we're all little scientists in our own labs coming up with solutions Some may work, some do work. We can collab them together and maybe come up with a final solution. But right now, I just think that we should all be scientists in the lab. And while we're scientists in the lab, our own individual lab, we have to practice VGQ. And another thing I want to say, another possible solution could be the 10 behavioral stops. And I think Dr. Wilson added 3 additional behavioral stops. And one of them is stop gossiping, stop squabbling. Just imagine individually we stop killing one another, stop stealing from one another, stop selling drugs to one another, stop gossiping about one another. While we're in that lab trying to figure out what we need to do, I think we will be ahead. I don't know. Again, because I'm a victim. And I'm trying to find out a way to replace the system of white supremacy. So I really want to say that because I don't think if somebody had an answer, I think it would have been done. But in the meantime, I'm going to be the scientist in that lab individually trying to figure out how to produce justice, and that's guaranteeing that no one is mistreated and whoever needs the help the most get the most constructive help. And then lastly, I think it's evolution. I believe it's mainly you that was speaking. I just have one question for you. How long have you been studying the Code Book and Dr. Wilson, if you don't mind? This is to the co-host.
I'm laughing because I'm wondering if I should answer codified or should I answer off code. I'm gonna answer codified, and then I'm gonna let you. I'm gonna see how many of us are true scientists, and we try to know a little bit about everything. Distance traveled around the sun has nothing to do with my understanding of racist man and racist woman and racist child. The biggest factor has been their abuse that has been constant almost from the moment I came into self-awareness or consciousness of, that I existed. I immediately knew something is wrong with this black stuff and them people. But I think when I was first exposed to the truth, it began to have an effect on me. It was when I didn't want to hear it. And a black male by the name of John X was reading this big white book around me all the time. Every day I passed this guy, I think we worked together, and I'd see him looking at me while he was reading this book. And I only known this guy all the years I knew him. This dude only read the Quran, but now he's reading this white book, this big, thick white book. And I remember I got into an argument with another guy. I think we were about to fight. And John X said to the other guy, "Don't blame Brother Taylor. He a victim. He's just a victim, brother. That's all we is. It's just I had never heard a fight about to be broken up between 2 black males and possibly more with the words, he a victim, just like us, we all victims." And then he told me he got it from the book later on. But yep, revolutions around the earth, motion is what time is a marker of. Our ancestors figured that out. We're measuring our speed, our travel distance around the earth. That don't mean that much, actually, as long as you're dominated by another people. But I spend a lot of time with the problem in my mind. If that's what you're referring to. Black Native.
Oh, thank you. I just want to speak from a Hebrew perspective. Um, as an Israelite, we know uh, who we're dealing with spiritually and in every aspect, and it tells us never. The Bible says never to trust your enemy, just like as iron rusteth, so is his wickedness. And when you identify who your enemy is, you know never to trust anything that comes out his mouth, his behavior, none of that. We understand that. And so we also believe in marriage, the black man, the black woman, the black child. We understand that that has to happen. We understand that we can't hate our brothers and show in our hearts. We have to love our people. We understand that gossiping we don't do. So I'm looking at it from a biblical perspective, but I'm also looking at it as being who I am here in this country. Both my parents were Black Panthers, so I was kind of raised on a revolutionary mind from a very young age. So I kind of study a lot of different things, and I'm going to get that book. I do have Dr. Francis Cress Welson's The ISIS Papers. I let my son hold it. He sent it back. He bought it for himself to read, but I don't have Neely Fuller's book. And I keep coming back to what can we do to stop what we're seeing and what has been going on globally. It's not just we're being dominated. They've dominated the plants. They've dominated the animals. They've dominated the sky. They've dominated the water. They've dominated this whole earth, and we're living in it. And we're living in a hell that they have created for us and a paradise that they have created for themselves under the illusion that we're included in this type of paradise, but we all understand that we're not. I'm looking at it like that. So I'm not confused in any kind of way of who these people are and what we're going through. Um, but like you said, on an individual level, yeah, as individuals, we can make changes because I don't expect us all as a group to ever try to overthrow this country. It's not going to happen. And I don't know. I have hopes that one day that maybe we can become the dominant people on this planet and be have justice and equality and not oppression and abuse. And that's really all I hope. And if it can't go down like that, which they don't want that because equality to them is a quality for everybody else is oppression to them. You know what I'm saying? They never want it that way. It's never meant to be that way. They didn't design the system to be that way, and they don't want that's not how they roll. And if we can't never have that, then what is the last resort?
Thank you.
Our land.
The concept to problem solving, basics throughout the evolution of people. The more specific you get, this is a principle, the more specific you get about what is the issue or problem or what is the goal. Problem solving really is the end of all goals. It's really problem solving. In order to problem solve, you have to really hone into specifically, okay, what is this problem? Even to mitigate it and make it less. Dr. Francis Cress Welsing with the 10 stops and those who advocate the 10 stops advocate the 10 stops as a way to mitigate or begin to minimize the conflict of people who are dominated against their will. No matter how submissive you are, there is no perfect subject to the system of white supremacy racism, only the ever-changing demands of demoralization and niggerization. Whatever we conform to is part of their demands of them dominating us, and it's going to be abusive. We are allowed to talk like this right now. We're allowed to, whether we know it or not, we are allowed to. How do I know? Because I read and I know for myself they cut out 1,000 tongues and burned out millions of eyes for reading words on paper that had no great significance, putting letters and symbols together and mistakenly uttering words of nothingness in front of those who classify themselves as white. And that disenfranchised the people who the science of reading and writing was revealed to once and for all. Dissuaded us from even being able to be readers, but we are talkers. We talk and we actually promote the idea that reading is worthless. Reading don't mean nothing, but listen to me talk. That's power. Perverted power, but that's power. So when problem solving, if a person tells you, this is for codified conversation control experiment. When a person tells you they have a God or a religion with a God, and then they ask you about solving a problem, that's an incorrect order. If you profess a God, there's no way you can come to me about a problem on the earth between people. Your God should have informed you of that, or you guys should have covered that base. It's never going to mix with the counter-racist logic of the science of people, because your God stands outside of that. And the whole history of how that God ever became to be your God can never mix with counter-racist logic, because your God should be omnipotent, omniscient enough to give you the way you're supposed to solve this problem. If you profess that you are a Republican, counter-racist logic does not come in the form of republicanism. It's for victims of white supremacy racism. Victims. Victims. Current. Present. Victims. Not independent agents. Not bank accounts. Counter-racist logic that offers the code and references to the code from other victims of racism, past and present. Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. This doesn't apply to individuals who stand outside of the victimization created by those who classify themselves as white. It's not even an attempted argument. Certain things are said that are true, and certain things that are said that are not true will always be revealed through questions and answers. Controls the conversation so there won't be open conflict. Just knowing that oil and water don't mix. What's a metaphor from the Bible? New wine and old wineskins. Don't mix. Burst. So remember the reference point. It's always going to go pushing back to the reference point. To the reference point. If you have Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, keep reading. Keep rereading. Because she gives the why. She gives her understanding of why they do what they do. Why they must. And how to mitigate the problem. But ultimately points to the opinions found in the code, how to replace the system of white supremacy with the system of justice. We all have a part, a cosmic duty. Maybe your God gave you yours. Opinion for future reference. Florida W, Florida. You want to speak?
Hey, yeah, peace, bro. It's Florida Water, actually. Peace to the room, y'all.
Florida Water. What up, though?
Nothing much, bro. I'm sitting here chilling and came into the space because the topic, of course, is very important. So first, to speak to the topic, I believe that race is racism. Like Brother Neely Fuller says, and this opened my eyes a long time ago. I was listening to a recording of him. He said, let's think about the word race. What is a race? And in a race, don't you have winners and losers? Like where are we racing to? So that's what race is. It's a competition. And the only reason for a race to be in existence is because those who decided to distinguish themselves as white decided to create whiteness. And you can't have whiteness without having the construct of race. So, I definitely love the topic. I raised my hand because something you said confused me a little bit. And I was just wondering if you could clarify that when you said that we don't value reading. Were you talking about the Black collective as a whole?
Yeah, for myself, I think we don't. I've traveled the earth and I've met a lot of black people from all over the earth, even some obscure places. And no, on average, no, sir. No, sir. If you meet a family of 20, it may be one reader in the family, two that have read a book since they were forced to read one at school or because of a job requirement. No, sir, we do not value reading at all. But the guys revealed it to us first, reading and writing. And if you study linguistics and anthropology, you know that that didn't happen two or three times in the history of peoplekind. That only can happen once, where you develop reading and writing. And then everything that comes from that is what we exist on today. So no, it's devastating to know what we were to what we are now.
Yeah, so the reason that confused me, I would say, it confused me because I didn't know if you were speaking about the Black collective or, if you were speaking in more of a micro, I guess, stance. But I would push back on it because I think that, well, not I think, actually, black people, especially black women too, are some of the most educated, formally educated people or groups, in this country. Also, when you look at our history, and I do recognize that you said today, but I'll get to modern day. But if you recognize in our history, we were, kept from reading and writing during the period of enslavement, and directly after that period, we went on to learning how to read at record rates, and started founding colleges and institutions of higher learning. And like I said, to this day, we're one of the most educated groups in this country, possibly in this world. And I think sometimes that is a standpoint that may be relative or subjective to the individuals that you may have encountered. I come across a lot of educated black people, and even from my own personal experience growing up, I was encouraged to read. It just seems like the community encouraged us to read. The phrase "knowledge is power" comes from our community. No other group created such a phrase, knowledge is power. So I'll
Can I
push back
answer
on
that?
that, and I want to encourage, you and everybody else to maybe not be as cynical when it comes to us as a people.
So I'm gonna answer that. I know you probably don't require an answer. I agree with you. Don't be a
No, I
cynic.
welcome it, bro. No, I absolutely welcome it. Thank you.
And I think cynical means to like deliberately depreciate and value, right? Yeah. To like be snide, right?
Is it deliberate? I mean, I would have to go to the actual
Well, I'm gonna
definition of
see if
what
it's.
that
I'm I'm
deliberate.
um I'm questioning if it's even if it's a denigration or depreciation or if it's just a statement of value. But I want to go to the ideal of reading, right? Before you learned to read, you had to prove you could learn to think. I don't mean the concept of reacting consciously to the environment you're in. I'm talking about to think, meaning to use the very capacities of reasoning and intellect necessary that when you read, you extract solutions, creative solutions to problems you currently have. We understand indoctrination can come through repetitive phrasing and imagery of words. We call that reading. Dr. Francis Cress Welsing used to say, reading is good, but thinking is better. Just the ability to read is not enough. The proof that you are reading correctly or in context to your reality is directly quantifiable to you and your people's problems being solved. We say and define the word education in the context of white supremacy. That means most indoctrinated to serve the interests of the racist. That's a counter-racist compensatory understanding of the word education in the context of Black people, Black females are the most educated. They have learned to administer their empire through the most willing, shapeable, and influential subjects of theirs. That's why there was a big mama in the house. No Samuel L. Jacksons in Django. A big mama. They administer white domination and abuse to the most pliable subjects, the most influential subjects. People who have always venerated the matrons, worshipped the matron ideal, the feminine concept before the male concept ever was conceived of as a god. They manipulated and perverted that. No, we do not read. We do not think while we read. I talked to a girl today at my job yesterday who I'd known for months, even went like on a little lunch encounter just to see what she thinks like. All these months I've known her, she finally said she reads all the time, 3-4 books a month. And I was thinking, counter-racist logic, there's no way in hell I'd be able to tell you're a reader based on the foolishness that comes out of your mouth. I didn't say that, but I said, really, what kind of books? Oh, Black sex erotica. Duh. She's reading all right, being indoctrinated. The evidence that single or by herself with 2 kids. So come on now. Live in that mama house. Not
And so
solving
I think
problems, but
we
reading
agree.
3-4 books a month. So yeah, I think you're right. We are the Black females are very educated. Black people do read, but to be more specific, we definitely not thinking.
Right.
Definitely
That's
not
and
reading what
I'm
we should
glad
be
you
reading.
said that, bro. Real quick, because I don't want to like keep this whole thing about our dialogue, but I agree with you, and I think the better description of that is critical thinking. Because we definitely read, and and it's promoted in our community. It's promoted that we read and that we become educated and stuff. It's just in what context, are we reading, and in what context are we educating ourselves? And critical thinking is the missing component. So yeah, I appreciate the conversation. I do appreciate what you just clarified for me. And like I say, I agree. Where there may be any semblance of disagreement, I think it's just a matter of nuance. And so yeah, y'all, I'm definitely gonna stay tuned in.
In my opinion, the best counter-racist thing you can have, the best counter-racist weapon is the desire for truth. Not a desire for agreement, not a desire to disagree. Because we can do that too. I used to be addicted to that. when you run from truth, you can be addicted to arguing or
Right.
just disagreeing. I used to be there, and that's not a choice I've indulged in quite some time. And it's an obsession that the racists teach us to have. Anything to deny reality, because the cognitive dissonance that confronts you, the contradiction of what you want to believe and what reality is. But the best counter-racist weapon is that desire for the truth, just to want it a little bit, just to scratch after truth a little bit, comes in like a flood. That's how I know. That's why I believe that the gods they're with us against racism. Because if you just want to know the truth about what it is you're doing to help the racist, or what it is you're doing that you ought not to do because it's under their influence, the information comes immediately. But we've been taught that because our emotions don't agree immediately, or because of our behavior patterns are so contrary, that we can't recover ourselves out of their lies, out of the sunken place, that we can't recover ourselves from the perversions that they put us in. But they're all based on knowing the truth, words accurately describing the reality that you exist in. We think in paragraphs of words in order to do basic functions. I'm gonna get up and go get some water. Before you do it, you already formulated the words and pictures in your mind and figuratively, and it gave you the will to do so. So if we get that intricate in describing this problem and describing what is really going on, what white supremacy racism is, if we are willing to accept what it is, the universe will help us figure out how it works so we can work against them. How we can literally dissolve their effect on us and make ourselves into who we ought to be. Over time, we can mitigate the filth they've taught us to be conditioned to use as our comfort system. Even the filth thinking, even the wasted time and effort to build the European god of oppression, the ego in our minds, that individually we have an individual reality or identity in the world. That's the whole sickness behind us spending more time on our hair than we do on what's in our brains, inside our heads. It's because someone else has convinced us that that really matters. When it doesn't at all matter to anyone who really makes things happen in our existence. People who really matter. They don't know the name of the weave. They don't care about the shade of color of the mascara. They don't give a damn how many hours you was at the barbershop. They think it's quite stupid that you don't have creases in your Jordans. That they wouldn't even recognize or notice unless it's to keep your mind in the stupefaction that stuff really matters. We have to know that. We have to know that any concept of individualism, not individuals, individualism, that you create your own reality, is a lie from them. If you create your own reality, why weren't you born in the universe all by yourself? And then you create the rest of us to come along when you want to be entertained or occupied. That's a crazy concept in and of itself. A great book for many of us to try to find. It was covered by the book club on the Cows, the Context of White Supremacy podcast. It's a book called Crazy Talk, Stupid Talk. This book will reveal how much we've been under the influence of the racist just in the basic ways we think. You're supposed to be able to think about how you think, and they discourage us from doing that so that we can correct ourselves and correct them as the problem. There's nothing wrong with thinking about how you think. There's nothing wrong with saying, damn, I've been defining the world based on the lies the racists have given us. Because logically, it don't line up to say black people are educated when they're under oppression. Oppression and education don't fit in the same sentence, unless you're saying the oppressor is very educated to have the oppressed. You can't be intelligent and a slave at the same time. You can be useful in the administration of your slave master, but you cannot be intelligent, or you would not be the slave. black boys and girls. Stop these lies and you'll be a different being. Change your consciousness. You will be a different being. Do you know how much joy there is in knowing I don't have to believe that lie? I don't have to be scared of UFOs. I don't have to. I'm at the baddest on the planet called the white man. I don't have to be worried about no UFOs. That's what you have to worry about. See,
Don't
I've
forget white
seen the
women.
devil.
Don't forget white women.
Amen. Who you think his co-pilot is? But see, when you ground yourself in the truth of understanding what it is and how it works, let them have 1,000 trained derailings. When they're ready to kill you, they'll come. They'll do it. You don't have to be looking at the next news broadcast getting fright hype. That's an illusion. You will say to yourself, media lies. If you just say white people that control the things we call mass communication promote lies. That's their basic weapon. You'll stop watching the news at 8. Maybe watch it once or twice a week to keep abreast of the lies. But you'll stop going to that and saying, oh, this is what we ought to focus on now. It will destroy your mind to focus on just the local racist, just the regional racist, just the national practice of white domination and abuse. It will break your mind and have you thinking foolish ideas that your little race over here called an African American and you got something to do and you got to get some money and it's going to stop everything. How many people died on the continent of, how many 12-year-olds died under 12 on the continent of Africa last month? And we're worried about Keisha now. And I don't mean any disregard, but that's how disregarded we all are. And we're supposed to spend countless miles of energy saying just, oh, woe is us. No, they're terrible all over the globe. And if you look at all over the globe, you can bear this load a little better. We're looking for a tipping point. We're not advocating some idea that one day we're waiting for all people to follow the code. Basic math is a tipping point of everything. Tipping point of everything. We're already on the uptick because white supremacy racism has not been coming out of the mouths of victims for even 10 years straight. But look at how much we're saying it now and able to communicate accurately a little bit. A little bit. Salt? There's a great book called The Tipping Point by Malcolm Glazer Gladwell. I can't remember. He's a non-white male, unfortunately, with a white supremacist parent. But he wrote a good book called The Tipping Point. He's one of the unfortunate non-white victims who understood the ideal of algorithms. And so they used his research and his writings to help refine racism more. But there's truth in his research. There's truth in his research about how to affect huge populations of people behavior and make a global movement. Art?
Yeah, I just wanted to get some clarity on what you just said. Are you saying that I should be worried about Africa, the people that sold my people?
No, I'm not saying you should be worried about African people's. No, I'm saying that if you look worldwide at what races do, all deaths are equal under the system of white supremacy racism. If you study the area of the world or the area of life called war or military, you'll understand that rank and file means everything. What rank of person who is creating or anything that happens underneath the person that's most in rank is the person who's most responsible. So we are under a global system of world white supremacy racism. So if I understand that I'm under a global system and not just a local, regional, national system, I won't allow them to distract me from resisting them to look at another victim at another portion of the chain of discontents. I'm not looking at the chain of discontents to find the culprit. I'm looking at those who create it and those who control it. I'm not looking at other victims to find out where they went wrong. We've all went wrong, apparently, because we all maintain our domination and abuse. We all have ideas and concepts in our head that will further allow us to be divided against ourselves while they enjoy our domination and abuse.
So you
So
saying,
they arm us against
can you
ourselves,
can you
Art,
define they?
with a false concept that this space is created about race is racism. There is no genetic nor biological marker for color or for race. The terra firma belongs to those who rule the people on it. The white supremacists rule and dominate us on the planet. Local, regional, national, global system of people. We're not using this space to further divide the lie that we are somehow ranked in subjugation.
I haven't been in the room that much, right? So I kind of let a lot of things slide, like interrupting each other. I've done a little myself, which is incorrect. We're going to be courteous towards each other. That's one of the ways. People want to talk about what we could do. We cannot be discourteous towards each other and not talk over each other. That'll help dismantle the system. Go ahead, Art.
Yeah. I just didn't get what he was saying. Uh, I don't view Africa as victims in any capacity. I think that they have a majority, and I think that if they ever get together and get past their tribalism, they'll be a very strong force to be worked with. I don't even I can't even imagine looking at them. Now, when I look at African Americans, they're not the majority. They've been treated like shit for fucking 300 to 400 years. There's definitely a little bit of
Wait a minute.
okay.
Profanity.
So yeah,
Stop
yeah, okay,
acting
okay,
white.
so
We're not
okay,
going to use
okay, okay,
profanity.
fair enough. Sorry about that, but yeah, but you get my
Not
general
fair
point.
enough either. Wait a minute. The term fair. If you look, you find a real old dictionary. You look up the term fair. You see it has many definitions, right? And it means white. So yeah, let's try to not use that term. Look it up for yourself if you don't believe me.
Okay, the point is, they couldn't even vote to 1965. I think everybody knows what that means, right? So, taxation without representation, whatever that means to every individual in here. Um, yeah, there's a little bit of difference in leverage in those two different scenarios. That's what I'm ultimately getting at.
Okay, y'all got 5 minutes to talk about racism, white supremacy, what it is, and how it works. Because I'm shutting it down. I need to charge my phone.
Thank everyone for participating. Remember the intention. Art, you probably haven't heard, but this space was centered around a book called The Code, United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept, and the accompanying word guide, written by Neely Fuller Jr. You can get the book by going to www.producejustice.com. This counter-racist concept, racist racism, follows the counter-racist logic that racism is defined by a synonym of the system of white supremacy, a global system of people who classify themselves as white and are dedicated to dominating and abusing everyone in the known universe who they classify as not white. This system of racism has forced a counter system or a counter reaction to said men, women, and children. And that's what our aim and our goal is, to overthrow and to replace those who practice racism with those who practice justice. That is the only war we acknowledge and we recognize in the world among the many battles. It's truly against those who believe in racism and those who don't. So look into the code. It's for victims of racism. If you're not a victim, this discussion, this room, and the code, not for you. But to all, peace.